America done for me?
When you oppress a people, all we gonna do is blow up in your face.
Oh my God! Buildings beginning to collapse!
No formula, no order. Let's intimidate these people, and by making them stand in the race.
11:42, and we're still waiting for more. If I could have that half of my life, no fear.
We still got from now to November, can prevent this from happening again.
It's a future where everybody has what they need, what they deserve, what they want. Just to remind you of why we're here.
My name is Camila Love. I am a Black trans woman. I am 20 years old. I am an artist and a resident of Minneapolis. I am a friend. I am a sister. I am a colleague. On June 1st, Ayanna Dior was attacked by a mob of people. In response to this, I was outraged. I decided to speak out because Black trans men and women are attacked on a daily basis and targeted. In response to my words, I was met with harassment, violence, and even held at gunpoint. This is a call to action. You can provide resources by giving up your space, your time, your assets, your money, food, shelter, water, clothes, love, respect. We do not need guilt. We need action.
Good evening, family, and welcome to the Black National Convention. My name is Phil Agnew, and I'm here in Miami where I live and organize. I'm a founding member of the Dream Defenders, an organization founded out of the demand for justice for Trayvon Martin in 2012. Since then, at least 5,000 people that we know of have been murdered by the police in this country. Just a few nights ago, Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in Kenosha County, Wisconsin. His children were watching. Thankfully, he is alive and stable, and we uplift his healing. It's time for us to organize to put an end to the physical, emotional, economic, and political violence against Black people in this country. Now, this space was inspired by the 1972 Black National Convention held in Gary, Indiana. That convention brought together delegates from all 50 states to create a Black national agenda. It sought political clarity, and they hosted crucial debates on the various strategies towards Black power and Black freedom. Now, Shirley Chisholm, unbought and unbossed, had just announced her run for president a few months earlier, and just like today, there were a lot of different opinions. We honor that spirit by forging our own principled debates tonight, and we're gonna tell our story on our own terms. You just saw 2 pieces of brilliant work. Our promo was created by Black British filmmaker Jen Nkiru, and the second piece comes to us from Minneapolis, where Sister Camila Love is laying down a mandate and reminding us that all Black lives matter. Today, I'm also here to support my 2 sisters and co-hosts, Angelica Ross and Kayla Reed. Together, for the next 3 hours, we're gonna guide you on a journey where we freedom dream together and work to build Black power. And on that note, I'm gonna pass the mic to my sister Kayla in St. Louis.
Welcome. My name is Kayla Reed, and I'm the Executive Director of Action St. Louis and one of the co-founders of the Electoral Justice Project of the Movement for Black Lives. And tonight, I am one of your co-hosts. 6 years ago, my life was forever changed. On August 9, 2014, when Michael Brown was killed by a police officer here in St. Louis, Missouri. I came out into the streets along with my community to protest, and we've never left. We are still here. August 28th is a major day in Black history. Today, in 1955, Emmett Till was murdered. In 1963, 250,000 people attended the March on Washington. In 2005, Katrina touched land. In 2020, August 28th is the day where Black people are gathering to roll forward a new agenda for Black liberation. We are convening under the weight of a pandemic with 180,000 lives lost, an authoritarian federal government, and white nationalist forces empowered by the current president to stalk and harm Black dissenters. It is not enough to simply utter the words Black Lives Matter. We demand more, so much more. Who will defend and protect Black lives? Who will present a bold and clear vision for our bright futures? We will. Now over to Angelica Ross in Atlanta.
Welcome to the Black National Convention, presented by the Movement for Black Lives. Woo! On behalf of millions of Black people of all ages, genders, abilities, and ethnicities, we are so glad you are here. I am in the great city of Atlanta, so we're repping 3 Black epicenters, and there are so many more. There is no place where Blackness does not exist. So when I say here, I mean everywhere. Global, expansive, powerful. 2020 has been a lot, a whole lot. If nothing else, we can see that almost all of our systems are in a state of crisis. Education, voting, healthcare, jobs, housing, environment. It's asked us to create our own solutions, to stay safe, to change, to sacrifice. And so many of us have stepped up to that call. And the work continues. During these 3 hours, we are going on a journey together across the country and continent to learn about the work Black organizers and creators are doing for Black creativity, power, joy, and liberation. Anywhere there is an injustice against Black people, there's a story of resistance. Tonight, we are telling some of those stories. Now, we all know that Blackness is not a monolith. So, let's be clear. We're not going to agree on everything, and we're not going to get to cover everything tonight. But we want you to engage, learn, challenge, and watch. And come back to blacknovember.org to watch the things that speak to your heart again and again.
I thank the Movement for Black Lives for having invited me to address the Black National Convention 2020. This is an extraordinary moment. More people than ever, not only in the US, but all over the world, are finally acknowledging that racism is not simply about individual attitudes that can be overcome with individual therapy or the like, and that it is not simply about developing policies of diversity and inclusion which leave larger structures intact, structures that were responsible for white supremacists and exclusionary practices in the first place. I can also say I am immensely excited because we are finally engaging in public discussions in Black communities and beyond about radically transforming those structures that have served as the lifelines of racism, misogyny, transphobia, ableism, and the economic injustices that are ubiquitous. Prisons are racist and inhumane institutions that do not make our society safer. They do not rehabilitate. Efforts to create better prisons most often render state violence more permanent and more palatable. Racist police lynchings, such as the one that claimed the life of George Floyd, cannot be ended without abolishing the very institutional conditions that rendered possible his murder, Breonna Taylor's, Tony McDade's, Rayshard Brooks, and the untold numbers of others. The connection between state violence and racism is not simply a U.S. problem. Let us remember that Black queer activist Marielle Franco was assassinated by a former police officer in Brazil. Adama Traoré was murdered by a police officer in the suburbs of Paris. His sister Assa has led a movement against racist state violence in France over the last 4 years. People in Iran are still standing up to the government in an attempt to memorialize those who died in the 1988 prison massacre. We do not get rid of the old and assume that the new must be constructed on the same foundation as the old. We create new foundations, new footprints, new societies. Our focus today cannot be so narrowly directed toward what we oppose, but rather it should be directed at what we want. This is a moment ripe with possibility. So let the convening of the National Black Convention be a launching pad for a radical left agenda, a Black left agenda, and will encourage us all to push ourselves to fight for the future and for the world we deserve.
Hi, my name is Derica Purnell, and I am so excited to be in conversation with this wonderful group of people, talking about abolition. We have a short amount of time, lots to cover, so we're going to jump right into it. So very first question, for someone who's never heard of abolition, who's watching all the protests in the streets, who's seeing defund painted all across Black Lives Matter, what does abolition mean?
Abolition for us is working, centering ourselves in community-led, people-led processes that are outside of a current system of police, jails, and prisons, and doing that work to figure out through transformative processes how we get to something, what different looks like.
TL, would you like to answer also? What does abolition mean to you?
Hey, thanks for having me. So for HERD, our organization views abolition as disabled people being able to fully live with all of the rights and supports and access and love that they need to thrive and survive. We understand abolition, disability justice as a requisite for abolition, that you cannot understand abolition without understanding that the United States government has always used constructed ideas about disability, delinquency, and dependency, intertwined with constructed ideas about class and race and criminal, right, to cage and disappear undesirables. And so we understand every single issue of inequity and injustice as a disability rights and disability justice issue. And we see abolition as a project that inherently centers the margins of the margins and acknowledges that disabled people are disproportionately affected by the entire carceral apparatus, from psych facilities to nursing facilities to group homes / facilities to prisons and jails and immigration detention, et cetera. Disabled people are in fact disproportionately represented in those spaces. And so we need to center disability. And so that's a big thing for HERD and the Harriet Tubman Collective as well.
Rich, I'm gonna go to you. What does abolition mean to you?
Abolition, I got to think about when I came home from the joint, right? And I was nowhere near abolition of that system. I hated that system. I had a lot of anger towards that system, but I didn't quite know that dismantling it was even a possibility, right? So for me, abolition was about me acknowledging or kind of learning that, yeah, there can be an alternative to things, that everything that is doesn't have to always be. And that through that acknowledgement that, we can change things, became, then I became an abolitionist. I grew into it by actually seeing things change and learning the process of how we can change things, right? Becoming an organizer and seeing policies I never thought, change, right? Like ban the box.
Tony, Michelle, I'm gonna go to you. Is that Tina Turner behind you over your right shoulder?
Yes, it's Tina Turner and it's Donna Summers.
Okay, all right.
Diana Ross, Teddy Pendergrass, Aretha Franklin, all my things.
Okay, I'll be all up in y'all living rooms on Zoom. You think I'm just talking to you by really being your backgrounds too. So Tony, what does abolition mean to you?
Yes, so abolition for me is simply the dismantling of systems and groups of people that oppress us, right? And for the Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative, as a Black, trans, and queer organization, we see abolition as the ending of violence against Black trans people, right? Mm-hmm. Particularly the ending of murders and murdering of Black trans women. And so as we are dismantling the system, is how are we also building the visions that was given to us by our ancestors.
Sometimes when I talk to Black people about abolition, they say, what about Black on Black crime, right? And they don't mean it as a talking point, as a right-wing conservative talking point to undermine the project. But they like, do you know my neighbor? Do you know who lived down the street? Do you know the people who, I've encountered throughout my life who've have caused me harm? And now you don't want me to call nobody. And if you're from, St. Louis, like where I'm from, or if you're from Chicago, all of these cities with urban violence usually get held up. It's look at the Black people in these places. They don't want abolition. I'm curious about why is it so important for Black people, especially, to know about abolition? We're talking about people who are vulnerable to their parents, their lovers, their neighbors, strangers, and the state, right? And the state. Rich, can you help me out? Why is it so important that Black people especially know?
In our communities are concentrations of the disproportionate impact of police harm, all state violence, of economic violence, right? And so they don't want us to dream of new solutions, right? They don't want young Black folks in communities that are food deserts to think about options that aren't capitalistic in order to create alternatives to fresh food and water, right? They want us to be dependent on their means. And essentially that is one of the biggest challenges, is that really shifting our people from, thinking, I think we have to begin to think about how do we control the institutions in place that are educating our people, that are feeding our people, so on and so forth, so that we can actually build abolitionist futures with abolitionist people, right? We need more people to be able to claim that, and I think it's extremely important.
Why should Black people know and care and practice, in abolition?
Abolition is the process, the action, the end result of faith, right? It's what is possible on the other side, and having faith that you and your people will make it through to what your imagination holds, right? So, and that's for Black folks' freedom.
Andrea, oh man, I'm so happy that you're here and you talked about abolition organizing, and you do work with people who are currently and formerly incarcerated, because we are and for years at this point have been in a moment with, people who are directly impacted, who are finally getting an opportunity to speak up around, what are the solutions around criminal justice reform?
As directly affected people who had the experience of incarceration, whether currently or formerly incarcerated people, we really, over the past 10 years, worked diligently on creating the space at the table, at the policy table, at the information table, at the academic table, at all of these, at the research table, to not just be the story, not just be the person that's brought out to be on this panel to talk about all of the really heart-wrenching and ugly pieces of our lives that landed us on a prison bunk. And then somebody else is turned to as the expert. We are the experts. We too are the experts. And we make a really complete picture and presentation and information about what this is all about.
Great, TL, I'm gonna come to you. Why is it so important, especially for Black people, to know and to understand abolition?
Often a lot of folks who practice abolition or who think they practice abolition and are in many realms are missing a large component of what is included in carceral systems. Just understanding how these systems literally feed off of and inform the other is really critically important. So all the folks on this call, I've been in community with all of you talking through that. What does that look like? Why is it important to understand prisons as sites of disablement? And what does that mean for our community coming home? What supports need to look like? What does abolitionist organizing need to look like, considering that disabled folks are disproportionately affected by carceral systems? So for me, it's like those everyday one-on-one conversations. My organization has been doing a lot of work with a lot of prison abolitionist organizations to get them up on this disability justice practice and language. So that's a lot of our work, and it's hard work, it's tough. But we're in the struggle, and we want to make sure that everyone is freed. Free all our people means free all our people. No coerced treatment for supposed drug addiction, et cetera. All of that is forms of incarceration. And when we play into that, we're playing into the hands of the carceral system when we say, don't incarcerate, just put them here, just throw them there, just label them with this disability. So that's the work for me.
Sometimes when I hear people talk about like cutting, the jail population by half, it's just like, well, there were like 3,000, 3,500 jails, there's almost 2,000 prisons. The institutions you named, the psychiatric, like coerced psychiatric facilities, there's drug courts, there's so many people who are on parole and probation. There's not correctional control, but it's carceral control. This is not including the foster care system. This is not including the school to prison pipeline. So there's so much opportunity to resist and to dream and to have alternatives and to create new societies altogether. So I'm so happy that you mentioned the scope of the systems that we're up against, because there's a lot of hands that we need on this freedom plow, right? And so thank you so much. And before we hop off, before they move on to other sessions, I'm so curious, what does winning look like to you?
Hey, this is TL. For me, winning looks like folks fighting for liberation of all types are literally one and the same, that there are no separations between them. And folks are really thriving and living, and no more cages, no more incarceration of any type, that we quite literally have rest, right? Like I feel like rest is something that Black people have long since deserved, and we have paid dues that we never owed. And we're still paying on those unowed dues now. And it's time for that to end, and it's time for reparations. So all of those things look like winning to me, and getting everybody home with us and living free.
Us looks like the implementation of all of the pieces of our abolitionist work that we do under the infrastructure of reimagining communities, our participatory defense, participatory budgeting, our cooperative business fund, our liberation political training project, our clemency project, and most importantly, our Transform Harm project.
Okay, Tony Michelle, bring us home. What does winning look like to you?
Walking beside all of these amazing people and their visions and plans and strategies to win. That's winning to me, number one.
Y'all need to go on tour. Like this for y'all organizations, y'all need to take this on the road. This is so good. I feel so honored to even be in conversation with each of you. And I'm so grateful that all of you doing your organizing work. And I think we made the time. So thank you. Thank you for joining the conversation.
We have had many Black conferences before, but a most important thing happened here in Gary, Indiana. For the first time in Black political history, Black people were able to combine two distinctly different kinds of political power: the power of the ballot box and the power of protest groups. The mobilizing of these two forces here in Gary in this spring of 1972 has greatly increased the political effectiveness of the Black community.
It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today, and really not only recounting that history is special to me, but looking at how we carry it forward.
It is indeed an honor to meet with you, Mayor Lumumba. I remember your dad at the National Black Political Convention. We were trying to get the Black agenda passed at that point. And I was wondering, as a mayor, what things do you relate to in the activities of your father and folks like me that were following him, and the leaders we had doing grassroots independent politics, and how that fits with what you're doing now in Jackson, Mississippi?
Well, one of the challenges that we have to recognize is that as we see leadership that thinks like us, we have to understand that our people have been locked out of the process for so long that not only do we have to have political organization, but we have to have political education. So we understand the structures as they exist, and even, you know, dare to break down the structures that don't work for us. And so it is our mission through a collective process that we move our people from being the governed to the governor. I should only be a byproduct in what I'm doing that helps move communities to having greater access to governing themselves.
And I imagine it has a broader social contract attached to it. And it's everything from LGBTQ to other dimensions of humanity and social organization that we got to take a look at.
We have to understand that while we are certainly privileged to have more leadership that looks like us, now our goal has to be to have leadership that thinks like us. And so I encourage our communities to turn this political process on its head and re-envision how we draft our own agenda instead of, you know, electing people who tell us all of the wonderful things they can do on our behalf. We create our own agenda and draft the people who represent or who subscribe to the agenda that we have collectively put together as a community. What were some of the things that you can recall about 72 and what came out of that movement, the primary takeaways?
We had organized folks from all over the country, and I could see that there was a tremendous body of our folk who wanted liberation and believed in independent politics. And what I would hope, what we see now, is that the same type of energy can be harnessed like it was in the 60s.
I want to thank you for being my elder and you know, having a history that allows me to stand here today. There's an African proverb that says that someone is sitting in the shade today because someone thought to plant a seed a long time ago. I appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate you too, man. Keep up the good work, building independent infrastructure that's Black controlled and owned is the name of the game.
The Workhouse is a living, breathing monument to white supremacy and racism here in St. Louis. The Workhouse wouldn't exist without cash bail. I was the victim of domestic violence, and I did what they say you're supposed to do. I left my husband, I took my 4 kids with me. I've never felt less human, less deserving, had less dignity.
This particular facility is also well known for having really horrendous conditions, abusive conditions, abuse by jail guards, and that's almost synonymous with the workhouse at this point in St. Louis.
Cash bail facilitates naturally is this over-dependence on the carceral state.
We are acculturated in this society to thinking that the only solution to our problems are punitive solutions.
When I got out of the workhouse, I said that I was going to spend the rest of my life working to tear down the systems that tried to destroy me. So now I'm just like, so what's next? What are we doing next? We taking on the police? We taking on the police budget? Like, what else are we gonna do?
When we started this campaign, it was literally about 6 people sitting in a room that said, we should launch this campaign. We should focus on this, sustain this call, build a strategy around it, demand it until it happens. And it went from that 6 or 7 people to thousands of people in St. Louis that have gotten engaged.
This campaign has changed my life. It has changed the life of every single person that lives in St. Louis, whether they know it or not.
If you want a city without your jail, get your people together, come up with a strategy.
Because when we fight,
we win.
My name is Chino Hardin, and I'm the co-executive director for the Center for New Leadership on Human Justice and Healing.
It's not just Trayvon Martin and George Floyd. There's a lot of people that wasn't on camera that got killed by the police. Look, they got us caged off like animals. The police harassing me before with stop and frisk. You know how many times I got stopped by the police on a stop and frisk? Sometimes it's like 4 times back to back in one day. We're trying to see how we can get the government foot off our neck so we could breathe. See what I'm saying? We wanna breathe to the point where we can blossom as a flower. As a black person, I wanna blossom. I want my kids to blossom.
It's important for folks from Bed-Stuy to know how to live with the land. I have been camping and learning to live with the land for over a decade now. To leave Bed-Stuy and go to New Legacy, I think they're gonna be in awe. I think conceptually we could think about mountains and trees, like we've all seen them, right? But I think watching that on TV or seeing it passing by really quickly in the car is a completely different experience from being developed in it.
Nature! Now we can breathe.
And it is
think about it, now we can actually breathe.
I've always wanted to see a waterfall. The only waterfall I ever seen was on a Cold Spring bottle.
Clear water, like, I'm so used to Coney Island, the dirty water.
It's a part of our healing from the atrocities of slavery and genocide and imperialism.
A lot of kids, they grow up in the projects or a low-budget neighborhood and they never get to see this right here.
That's why I feel like this moment right now, like we all realizing this right now because we're out here. We're not surrounded by the city. We're not worried about who's over our shoulder.
Yo, coming from this to go back to the city to see the police all over, and they sit there and tell you like, yo, you gotta go. Like, yo, you can't sit right here. What you mean I can't sit right here, man? I just came from nature and I was sitting everywhere. Like, I was just sitting wherever I wanted to go.
I think when people are on the land that New Legacy has developed for them, they will be taking back a New Legacy with them. New Legacy is not just an idea of a place. It's an idea of a spirit. It's an idea of a community. It's an idea about all land, not just green land, even the concrete land that doesn't necessarily love us, but we have to interact with, right?
Accessibility as a cornerstone in our call towards justice is a goal that the Movement for Black Lives is committed to realizing. The more accessible our work, the deeper our impact, and the more connected our push for change. We have a responsibility to show up for each other, however we can. I got to talk to Vilissa Thompson, an accessibility expert and organizer working for Black liberation within the Movement for Black Lives.
Welcome back to the Black National Convention. I am sitting here today. My name is Kayla Reed, she, her pronouns. I am a full-figured Black woman with long brown twists and a Black dress with my I voted pin, wink, wink, and burgundy glasses. And I am sitting here with the fabulous and brilliant Vilissa, who is going to introduce herself.
Thank you so much for that, Kayla. My name is Vilissa Thompson. I use she, her pronouns. I am a light-skinned Black woman who is sitting in a wheelchair. I have on small rectangular-shaped glasses, a purple reddish lip. My hair is long and hanging down my back. I have on gold hoop earrings, and I have on a sleeveless top that is multicolored.
For those who are watching, can you explain what disability justice is and why it's significant in our movement?
Yes, disability justice is basically centering the intersectional oppression that disabled people can experience. Some of those identities are disabled people of color, like myself, disabled people who are houseless, disabled people who are immigrants, disabled people who are queer, and so on and so forth.
There are a lot of misconceptions about how we even talk about people with disabilities, how we talk about people who have different accessibility needs. And it is something that we have to hold. That's not a foreign concept. There's not people on the other side. There are folks in our families, there are folks in our communities, there are folks in our organizations who would have a better experience in our movement, who would show up stronger because we see them as their fuller selves. And so I really do appreciate that as a framework that we have to continue to hold, because it impacts so many people.
People want to focus on accessibility as a ramp, but accessibility comes into providing ASL and captioning for our virtual events like we're doing for the BNC, to ensuring that if you're doing a presentation, you describe the images on your PowerPoint, or what we did with ourselves is describing who we are for a visual description so that people who may be blind or low vision can know what we look like. So it's the little things like that that really is important to adding a disability lens that doesn't just go into the areas of interest when it comes to police brutality, employment, housing, but also making people feel fully included into our spaces, fully welcome into our spaces so that they know that they belong. The last thing I want to say is that disability is not something to pity. Disability is an identity, it's a culture, it has a history, it has a community that is so rich with diversity that everyone should take notice as to why including disability is a priority.
Thank you so much. And I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Grateful to be in this work with you.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's so grateful to know you and be a part of this work and to just be seen.
I never expected that I'd be in New Orleans going on strike from an African-American owned company. I never expected to be treated the way I've been treated. I never expected that I have to put my family through what I'm going through on strike. I never expected to go where we've gone. I never expected my mama to be proud as she is now. I never expected my family to respect me the way they respect me now. I never expected to be on strike with 14 strong Black brothers. I never expected. You don't know what it's like to work for Metro. You don't know what it's like to get up out your bed every day, not knowing how much you're gonna make. You don't know what it's like to being chased by your boss trying to run you off the clock. You don't know what it's like to work for 5 kids every day. You don't know what it's like to wake up and to go on the line every day with 14 guys and plus another brother. You don't know the struggle.
Now it's time for y'all to see the faces that's behind y'all trucks every morning. Now it's time that we start getting the respect that we deserve. Now it's time for us to demand what we need to support our family. Now it's time for my kids to see what standing up looks like.
Vivid erase us from map and memory. Hold conferences on how to classify our disappearance. For years we found no record of diasporic transactions until we found ourselves listed in insurance claims as commodities. Now that we're human, we're in the way. They seek the peace to kill us. In peace. I want my money back. I'm down there drowning in your fat. You got me on my knees praying for everything you lack. I ain't afraid of you. I'm just a victim of your fear. You cower in your tower praying that I disappear. I got another plan. When that requires me to stand on the stage in the street. Don't need no microphone to beat. And if you hear this song, if you ain't dead to sing along, make it from this head drum till you get where you belong. I got a list of the meds written on the palm of my hand. I'm on my vision, you gon' know where I stand. We're living hand to mouth. You wanna be somebody, see somebody, try and free somebody. Listen to meds written on the palm of my hand. I'm on my vision, you gon' know. I wrote a song for you today while I was sitting in my room. I jumped up on my bed today and played it on the broom. I didn't think that it would be a song that you would hear, but when I played it in my head, I made you reappear. I wrote a video for it, and I act out each part, and then I took your picture out and take to my heart. I take to my heart, nigga, I take to my heart, and then you pull away from me and tear my life apart. I gotta listen to meds written on the palm of my hand. I'm on my vision, you gon' know where I stand. We're living hand to mouth. You wanna be somebody.
My name is Dominique Walker. I am one of the co-founders of Moms for Housing, and the goal of our organization is to reclaim houses back into the hands of the community and to house unsheltered moms and children. There's 4 vacant houses for every 1 homeless person in Oakland.
We are reclaiming this house from a billion-dollar corporation who bought this house at a foreclosed price. It has been vacant for 2 years while people are living out on the street.
Homelessness affects your mental health, brain development in children, their physical health, and 28% of the homeless population now in Oakland is under the age of 18. We felt like this was necessary to take this step. Like, even when I personally tried to go through the proper channels to get help to move and be able to pay these rents, they're still not affordable. So I feel like it was up to us to organize ourselves to be able to have housing.
They may have arrested the mothers tonight, but this was a win. This is a win.
That's right.
50+ days.
All right.
50+ days, mothers and babies off the street. This is a win.
The majority of the people living on these streets are Black people, and that is directly connected to the history of slavery and Jim Crow in America. Just with this one act, Wedgwood has offered to sell their entire Oakland portfolio to the land trust, so it is affordable in perpetuity.
This movement does not end today with us, with that house on Magnolia Street. We will not stop organizing and fighting until all unhoused folks who want shelter have shelter.
This is just a house. Mom's house is wherever we are, wherever we're organizing. This is becoming a movement, and it's going to continue.
Whose house? Mom's house! Whose house? Mom's house!
We are super excited that we have 4 brilliant people with us that have committed their lives to this work and have dedicated their lives to moving us closer to liberation and have worked to synthesize the role land and food will play in getting us there. So we have a lot to talk about in a little bit of time. So I'm gonna jump into it. So the first conversation I want us to dig into is, why is it essential that land is a part of the strategy for Black people to build power?
This is Dara. I can start. Once again, free the land, everyone. Want to give thanks to all of our collective ancestors for paving the way for us to be able to do this incredibly important work. You know, we know, as Malcolm taught us, that land is the basis for all power. And I don't mean, and we don't mean land and ownership in this sort of faux Black capitalist ownership sense of privatizing and trying to get rich off of land. What I mean is a process around us joining the movement to fight for space, for liberated territory, for our people to be free and self-determining. We're also talking about fighting for land to be decommodified and taking off the speculative market, to be in solidarity with Indigenous comrades, to rematriate the land, and get back to all of our Indigenous legacies of land-based knowledge. We have such a rich history of land-based knowledge, and ensuring all of our people have the means to be nourished, to be safe, to be whole, and in our full dignity. We've seen the decimation of our farming communities reduced by 98% through theft and all sorts of violence. If we truly believe in fighting for Black power, it must start and center our fight to reclaim, return to, and protect the land and our rights to fully actualize Black nourishment, healing, dignity, and a home for the most creative and revolutionary of our Black freedom dreams.
Yes, absolutely. That was so beautiful, Dara. Thank you so much for that. When I think about reclaiming the land, obtaining land, and the way that we use that to build power and free our people. I think about the ways in which gentrification is happening, right? And the ways in which non-Black people are coming in and, pushing Black people out to areas where, it causes disparities in their health. So in New Orleans, we realize and we notice now that a lot of our, our family members and community members are being pushed out to where all of these major plants are, which is causing cancerous health disparities. They don't have access to get fresh goods because they're so far away from city center. An increased, experience in terms of violence because people are just really, left destitute and without resources. So my, in fighting that violence and food insecurity and healthcare disparity, we want to create, and we did create the House of Tulip, which we went in and we bought Black land that was up for sale, Black property that was up for sale, and we beat out white buyers, right? Because we want to keep this, where we deserve to be, and we deserve to be well, to be in a place that will not kill us, right? To dismantle, to obtain these properties and to continue to dismantle white supremacy, to dismantle the land in which is incarcerating us. And so what we're doing is we're educating our community and we're buying these properties back, right? And we're giving them back to our community to use to help further and enrich their lives. And so creating a true inheritance for our people, right? It's not saying, no, you have to earn this. No, this is an inheritance for our future generations. We're going to keep this Black owned. We're going to keep this community led. And so we can build this power collectively that way.
First of all, I mean, we have to value the land, and we don't. Because my mama bought this house for $50,000. They want to give me $750,000. What am I going to do? I'm going to sell that house. And that's what we do. Stop selling your damn house. Stop selling your damn property, and then they come in and all of a sudden the property's $2 million. And that's what's happening in LA. I work with Destination Crenshaw, which it's going to be the first train that's leaving the airport. That goes down Crenshaw Boulevard through the community. And a lot of people accuse us of helping with the gentrification. And I'm like, no, we deserve good shit too. They see the value in where we're at. We don't see it. We see it in the money. But as Dorothy, the value is in the land, the gold, the diamond, everything is in the land, and we are the land. So what we have to do is change our values. Like Black Lives Matter. Do they matter to us in our communities?
Land is the basis of all wealth. Land is the basis of all power. Land is the basis of all independence. If we are ever, whatever movement that you are associated with, if you're looking toward becoming free and liberated, then you have to determine what will be your association to the land. If we can't feed ourselves, we can't free ourselves. If we can't feed ourselves, we cannot free ourselves. So we have to learn how we want to first free ourselves. Right. And that means that we have to learn how to feed ourselves. And everything that we eat comes from the land. Everything that we wear comes from the land. The reason that we have been, that this nation and really the world wants to exclude people, especially marginalized populations, from the land, because they recognize that if you have a land base, if you are anchored in your own property, that you own this property, then you have some rights. The rights in this nation are really granted to those folks who are landowners. The first property owners in this country were the landowners. They never brought us here for the intention of us becoming landowners, for us to become property development. That never was supposed to happen. We have come here to work for them and them only. We're never supposed to have anything for ourselves. So we have to determine, with everything that is based against us, everything that all of the laws that have been established, going back to old English law, how do the landed people take land from the people who had very little? And the laws of this country are basically based on that old English law to take whatever property you have from you and to give it to somebody who don't need it. So our effort must be to first understand how we have to move to take back control of take for the first time in many instances control of our communities. And we take control of those communities by first having an understanding of how the land base, what are the resources in the community that we have that we're going to build around.
That's the economics. We didn't get shown the economics of this in our schools, and that's accidentally on purpose. Once you show a child the magic of putting a seed in the ground, and all of a sudden they got a carrot. I made this. You're right, you did. You can't add that. That's for life. But we have to still keep instilling that in them. It's not just that one lesson. And a lot of us, all our lives, we had that one lesson where you put the seed in the jar and you watch it sprout. Oh my God, that's magic. Next. No, get that seed and put it in the soil in that garden at the school, and you're gonna have 1,000 seeds.
This is so good. I'm curious if I can complicate this conversation around land a little bit, because as Black folks, we were literally part of the first tier of capital in this country, right? Yep. And so for the movement for Black Lives, and I think many folks who are sitting in this panel, we consider ourselves anti-capitalist. And so I'm curious about our ability to be on and with land as a necessity for our liberation.
I think it's really important for us to name, what we mean, and also to be careful of replicating colonial patterns. We don't want the continuation of colonialism. We don't want which means colonizing the land, which means colonizing a people, which means displacing people, which means extracting from people and from the earth. We don't want that. And so I think we need to be clear about what we do want. And what we do want is a regenerative relationship with the earth. We do want a regenerative relationship with each other. We don't want to be extractive. It doesn't mean that our communities can't be well, can't be fed, can't be taken care of. And so what we need to see is a more collective sense around what we mean by wealth creation, what we mean around our relationship back to the land.
Let me say this. As we understand it, as has been presented to us, capitalism is based on exploitation. They built it based on free land, on free labor, on free access to capital, and on free management. We did all of that for them. So this is the greatest system ever created that you didn't do anything to work for. You didn't have to pay for it. You got somebody else to do everything for you. So we have to look at other models, because that model doesn't work for us. We can't go out here with an economic model that embraces capitalism at all. We just need to get away from it altogether.
We do.
That's the reason we're so involved in the cooperative development movement, because it engages people above anything else, above capital, above your political systems that control you. You ought to be able to have some say about whatever business you want to operate, or whatever businesses are operating in your community. Then you have to be organized to the point where you can make those things happen for you.
Yes, we literally could be in this conversation for hours, and want to give Dara a chance to give us the last word. What does it feel like to win?
When I think about us winning, it feels electric. I think about the feeling that I get when my feet are able to touch the earth, and particularly touching the earth without fear that will be removed, without fear that will be displaced, without fear that will be kidnapped by police, without any kind of fears, but an actual just deep connection to the land, to each other, and deeply rooted in our unapologetic Blackness.
Whose land? Our land. Whose land? Our land. Whose land? Your voice will not be silenced. We will walk upon Trump tomorrow. We
We say enough. We'll take back this stolen land, one rock at a time. If it's starting with Mount Rushmore, and it's not gonna end. It will never end as long as we have breath in our lungs, as long as we have blood in our bodies. We will keep marching. We will keep shouting. We will keep protesting. Because this is our land, and we're gonna take it back, and there's nothing they can do about it. What do we want?
Where's our stolen sisters? Where are our sisters? No peace! No peace! Land back! Trump, you're on stolen land! This is the territory of the Oceti-Sakowin. We are not leaving.
This is our homeland. This is where we had ceremony. This is where we hunted and camped. Where we did courtship. We had marriages here.
Our common enemy is white supremacy and systematic racism. We've seen what happened to our black brothers and sisters. We know that the movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter stands with us as Indigenous people as we collectively fight for our liberation, for the collective movement for our people. And our goal is not just to resist. Our goal is to radically transform this country so that it works for everybody.
This is sacred land. This is Lakota land. This is my land. I can stand right here.
The aggression today was come at from you guys.
Because we want our land back.
We ain't going nowhere. This is our land. It's been our land for thousands of years.
To the Benton County Sheriff's Department, to the Highway Patrol, this is a warning to each and every one of you. You are unlawfully on our land without the consent of our tribal leaders in violation of our treaties. You have an opportunity now that we're giving you to stand down and vacate our land. Whose land? Our land! Whose land? Our land!
This is the land of the Oceti-Sakowin. And we're prepared to stand our ground. Today has been a proud day to be Lakota. Today has been a proud day to be Indigenous. We shut down Mount Rushmore for 3 hours. And we did it in a good way. We felt that power from our ancestors. So Wopila Tonka Achichi Apolo to each and every one of you. For our people, for our Black Hill.
Listen, I'm not gonna lie. Living in Miami, I feel as vulnerable to climate catastrophe as I do to police violence. Scientists are predicting that this year, 2020, the hurricane season is gonna break records. In Miami, the water is rising. The rent is rising. Unemployment is rising. Next, Ayanna Johnson and Colette Battle, two of my comrades, two climate researchers and advocates, are gonna remind us why we cannot separate climate from race.
So Colette, I've had the pleasure of chatting with you a bunch of times, but not everyone knows you yet. Will you introduce yourself?
I'm Colette Pichon Battle. I'm the Executive Director of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy. I'm here in South Louisiana, and we work with communities of color on the front lines of climate change here in the Gulf South, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And I remember meeting you in DC at a meeting, and all I remember is you, I remember seeing a Black woman and ocean. That's all I remember. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. I am a marine biologist, and I'm just completely obsessed with ocean and climate policy. So when Colette and I met, it was at this summit for a Green New Deal and trying to figure out like, how would we actually make that work in a way that works for people? And so that's what it's all about, right? When we talk about saving the planet, it's like, but who are we saving the planet for?
Right.
Because I want to save it for the people that I love and the places I love and the creatures that I love.
What is it that we don't know about our oceans? Like why are they such an important part of who we are on this planet?
I think what people don't understand about the ocean is the enormous role that it plays in our climate system. When we think about carbon dioxide, when we think about heat, the ocean has actually absorbed 93% of the heat that we've trapped with greenhouse gases. It's absorbed a third of the carbon dioxide that we've emitted by burning fossil fuels. So the ocean is really trying to do us a solid. It's like buffering us from the worst that we throw at it, but it can't really take anymore. And on the flip side, it's also a hero. It's trying to feed us. It's trying to protect us from storms with coastal ecosystems. As you well know, down in Louisiana, it's trying to offer us sources of renewable energy. And so we need to just remember that the ocean is there to help.
Have you come across other Black folks doing climate work, or what's been your experience? I know you've got this great podcast and you get to talk to a lot of folks. Who are you seeing out there?
The short answer is not enough. I think we both know there are a lot of Black folks doing really important climate and environment work, but they don't often get the microphone. Their work doesn't always get the shine or the funding that it deserves. And so that's something I care really deeply about, is spreading that around. The next step is changing the rules of the game. This is a policy play right now. I know you are on to the policy game. So maybe you could share with folks, like, what are you working on now? What's next?
My dream has come true, because with the Movement for Black Lives, working with the policy table, we are now pushing a Red, Black, and Green New Deal. So a national climate policy, a national climate agenda that Black people are putting themselves into. I couldn't be more excited about it, because this is about Black lives and how many people died in Katrina. And this is our fight. This is about us. So I couldn't be more happy to be engaging more Black folks into this conversation.
In the same way that you've been working on this Red, Black, and Green New Deal, I've been thinking about the Blue New Deal, because the Green New Deal basically left out the ocean. And so maybe we could have like a red, black, and green and blue New Deal. It's like too many colors, but my focus is on coastal communities in these places where sea level is rising and floods are coming down and we're experiencing heat waves, and we know who's most at risk. It's the people who are always the most at risk.
That's right.
People who are already breathing the dirty air and having the dirty water. So I think this is really exciting, because it's a moment where the Movement for Black Lives and the climate movement actually have an opportunity to come together.
The alignment is clear, right? That divest, invest framework that M4BL is getting known for right now around defund the police. I mean, it is the same framework that we need to deal with these fossil fuels, these dirty fuels, this dirty energy. Exactly. We've got billions of American dollars going into funding and supporting corporations that are actually killing the planet. What we need to do is divest those dollars from those corporations, from these militarized actions, and put it into community, put it into the things we need. It's time to invest in Black communities, invest in our future, and invest in climate solutions from a Black vision.
So I want to introduce a national civil rights leader, Reverend Lennox Yearwood.
I am originally from Louisiana. All right, now, I like that. When Katrina hit New Orleans, 1,833 people lost their lives. Now, if you can go to a place that if they were hit by a Category 1 storm, it would have more disastrous effects. I said, well, where is that place? I'll be there. They said the Hampton Roads, Norfolk area.
Norfolk is particularly prone to flooding because of its location, flanked by the Atlantic Ocean, the Chesapeake Bay, and the James River.
That's my beach right there, and the 2 lakes on the side and my pool in the back.
The main ways out of the area in an emergency funnel to a set of just a few tunnels and bridges.
There's probably not another locality that's facing the challenges and the threats around water.
I'm not trying to see my area on the news talking about body counts and we can't find this person, we can't find these people.
The flood wall stops where the public housing area begins.
St. Paul's, like many public housing communities across the country, is more prone to climate flooding than the rest of the city, further complicating the question of what to do about public housing.
So you're looking at multiple billions of dollars to try to build a living with water situation.
We've got to rebuild it back in a way that lives with the water.
So they offer Section 8 vouchers and things like that to get people to move other places.
People are running out of places to go.
How are we the ones being hurt the worst by a climate crisis that we contribute to the least?
We used to mainly smell car fumes, and we didn't smell them anymore because we were growing things.
It's a long process. It's like you say, it takes a whole village.
We understand that this is an issue that affects us more than everybody else.
Climate justice and environmental justice all of it is centered on racial justice.
We don't have any other choice but to figure this out for our future.
Yes, you're in harm's way, but yes, you can be the solution to the rest of the country and the world to fix this climate crisis.
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm managing. You know, we are in interesting and challenging times. I'm not used to being in the house this much.
Yes, very, very true. But it is very interesting times of a lot of things are going on, especially the word accountability. What is accountability looking like in the tech industry? What does tech accountability look like?
For us, tech accountability really is about focusing on a wide range of mega corporations that inside of a capitalist structure have been able to amass a ton of power, have been able to buy up competitors and be able to set the sort of rules of our economy and our democracy by the ways in which they set up their algorithms, the ways in which they set up their incentive structures, the ways in which they set up their use of services and how people engage on those platforms. And so for us, it is about ensuring that these platforms, which have the potential to bring us into the future, don't drag us into the past. And so what we've seen on so many of these platforms is targeted ad policies that have allowed people to market ads just to white people, or just to women, or to avoid all sorts of communities. Algorithms that have been used to target various folks, in particular Black folks, Black trans folks, many folks who have already targeted and attacked out in the larger society.
So where's that line between what you're talking about there and, you know, in marketing, when we are trying to sell something to a particular audience, like where's that fine line?
I mean, the fine line is that, yeah, you should be able to market at a particular group and you should be able to engage them. But a white nationalist group shouldn't be able to set up a platform on Facebook and then through its algorithms be able to target and attack various people. Targeting marketing is something that we do in society already, right? Like you should be able to run ads on logo if you want to reach a community. You should be able to run ads on BET or CNN or MSNBC. But what you shouldn't have happen is have a situation where all sorts of content, micro-targeted content can live on that, and then ads can be placed on it that monetize that content, that allow that content to be profit. And so while we've been engaging and pushing on Facebook for years, we mobilized around this Facebook ad boycott, really to be able to tell corporations who were saying Black Lives Matter that you can't continue to support a platform and advertise on a platform that allows Donald Trump to incite violence against our community. You can't continue to advertise on a platform that allows him to lie about vote by mail, which we know was an attempt to suppress the vote. All of these things have to be part of ensuring that these platforms are not continued to be weaponized against us. Groups like the Center for Media Justice and Some of Us and Color of Change really sort of went to Facebook and demanded a civil rights audit to really audit all their policies and practices. This is about ensuring that government at its highest levels are holding corporations accountable, because when corporations are not held accountable, Black people are exploited, targeted, and put in harm's way. They will say that Black people are vulnerable, but Black people are not vulnerable. We are been attacked, targeted, and exploited. And that is why we have to build power to change the rules, because that is the only way that we can make a more human and a less hostile environment on these platforms.
So Rashad, what should we be on the lookout for in this upcoming election with regards to the election and the intersection with technology?
We're going to see an unprecedented amount of disinformation on this platform, focused on creating all sorts of attempts to suppress our vote. This will be happening at an incredibly fast and rapid pace, and we will have to do a lot of work to expose it, to help our people get the right information, and to be able to move on it. And so what we all need to be looking out for is that misinformation and the disinformation that show up on the platforms all focused on ensuring that the Black vote, the Black voice, and Black energy and power and culture is suppressed.
Wow. Well, we will definitely be on the lookout for that, Rashawn. Thank you very much for giving us all that heads up. We really need it. Thank you.
They call me Future because that's what we're fighting for. I've said this before and I'm going to say it again until it lives in us. Activism doesn't build character. It reveals character. You feel me? You all are the revelation. These families are the revelation. And we need the revelation in order to have a revolution. We are not just fighting against the government. We are not just fighting against the president. We are not just fighting against an administration. We are fighting against a belief system. And so, our belief system must be stronger. Our belief system must be better. Our belief system must be irresistible. And so we have to fight for each other as we would fight for ourselves.
Hey everybody, so excited to get this panel started today on the electoral justice ideologies that we all have been using to fight for our liberation. This panel will discuss the structural barriers that need to be removed and what it will take to win in November and beyond. The panel will also discuss how electoral justice as a framework is an important intervention as we continue to lift up voting as a strategy in our organizing. So my first question to this amazing panel is, how do you see elections and the ballot as a source of achieving justice?
I really look at elections as opportunities to do movement building, because when you're engaged on the ground with elections, you're talking to a lot of people. You're struggling with a lot of people around, their day-to-day lives, their lived conditions, the contradictions that they go through every single day. And I think it's an opportunity to build power. Unfortunately, sometimes elections are more like events where you have a big event and then the day after you sort of strike it, or it's like a sandcastle. You build this sandcastle and then like the waters just flow over it and then it's gone tomorrow. And I think when we talk about electoral justice, to me, it's ultimately about building power. And so how are we using elections, these opportunities to engage folks en masse in the thousands and the millions about the issues that we care about the power that we're trying to build, and then, attach it to what we want from our political leadership. To me, that's the power of elections, engaging in those relationships and then thinking about how you use that momentum after the election.
I want to move now to Bree, and it's the same question for you.
I don't necessarily see elections as achieving justice per se. I wouldn't necessarily use that term because I view the existing system itself as being fundamentally unjust in many ways. And it is the existing system that we are trying to fundamentally transform. And so I just kind of like really view it in that way as like, in that process, how are we understanding what it would look like to have a functioning democracy, right? I do think that, voting and kind of like recognizing what an election should be is a way to kind of exercise that muscle. Like I think democracy is almost like this muscle that we have to exercise and we have to practice as we, continue to theorize around what it would look like to actually have the system that we would like to see.
So I want to go now to you, Derek. If you could tell me a little bit about how do you see elections and the ballot as moving towards or a source or achieving justice? What is your opinion on that? Coming from the NAACP, which has a long track record of using the electoral process.
So election is about movement buildings. Election is about positioning. Election is about controlling budgets. Election is only a tool in the toolbox to get to the issue of power so the African diaspora can actually sit in a space to be self-determined.
Yeah, that's right. We have to engage in what what we've been trying to push of co-governance, right? Where we're constantly governing ourselves and moving towards community-led governance. I mean, I have so much, this conversation, like I would love to just keep going. But I wanna throw it now to you, Maurice, if you can talk a little bit about, where have you seen it work? What are you doing? I mean, y'all are doing a lot of great things. We wanna hear a little bit of your story.
In my experience in organizing Black communities on electoral organizing, on movement organizing, and issue organizing, is that Black people, and we're not a monolith. So, and I don't believe in essentialist thinking, right? There's some Black folks who aren't sharp at all, but on whole, Black people.
Who, Maurice? Who? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
But,
who you talking about?
Don't be talking about my people.
Just channel somebody in your head. That's who I'm talking about. But Black people are some of the most nuanced and sophisticated political thinkers, just everyday working class Black folks. It's that double consciousness, because that's how we survive. We need to understand and perceive our reality as well as the reality of the dominant culture. People who just live and swim in the dominant culture are only thinking through one lens. And I think that that's what positions us to be able to hold contradictions. So this contradiction around the two-party system and elections being insufficient, but an essential tool. Like we wake up every day in white supremacy. We understand that we live under white supremacy, and that when we wake up and in between when we wake up and go to bed, we need to come up with certain tactics for survival, to survive white supremacy. We know white supremacy isn't going away tomorrow or next week or next month, but it is our duty to try to end that system and try to end the structures that hold us back. And that's the same thing with elections. We know that the electoral system, that gerrymandering, that the money in politics, that all these things are structural barriers that aren't going to go away tomorrow and are insufficient and are stacked against us. And still, day to day, we figure out how to use elections in the most effective way for our survival. And we still want to focus on how do we eventually get to a place where we could have ranked choice voting, or ranked choice voting with multi-member districts, or eventually repeal the electoral college, or do these big things. But meanwhile, we do the necessary things for survival in order to build power. And I think this, this ability to hold contradictions, there is no way under white supremacy and capitalism that we won't be in struggle that includes contradictions. The question is, what contradiction are you deciding to hold? We're going to be wrestling with these contradictions. We'll have to deal with the trolls on Twitter. We'll have to, and I think the question is for us, it's like unity, not uniformity, right? Unity, struggle, unity. And that is, I think, the space, if we could develop unity, some principles that we agree on, and some stuff we know we ain't never going to agree on, and that's okay. Then we could have unity around those principles. We could struggle around those things we don't agree on, and then come back to unity. And I think that that is, to me, a generative space for Black liberation. And then the last piece around, yes, we need to have high standards for conduct, but we need to have a low bar of entry. And all of our people need to be able to be witness to the work that we do, right? Because we know we should anticipate our folks, when they come in the door, to be swimming in the white supremacy, to the consumerism, the homophobia, the patriarchy. We should not be surprised when we encounter that in ourselves and in our people and in our organizations. Our job is to be vigilant that when we see it, that we respond, and that we don't respond and chastise our people, but bring our people close to us.
I 100% agree that tension is a good thing. I don't think we get anywhere without tension. I also want to add that it is necessary for us to be in relationship with each other, even if we disagree with people, right? It's necessary. I've been in too many stories, in too many cases where I've had to have a relationship with the person that I disagreed with just so we could know each other's plan and strategy, and also help each other out when we needed it, right? If we actually come to this work in community, like my boss said, like President Johnson said, then we shouldn't have an issue building a relationship, because we have the same reason, the same core belief and reason why we're doing this work. And our end goal, right, is the same.
We have to figure out which questions are fundamental questions for Black liberation, and which questions are questions that people who are dedicated to Black liberation could disagree on. And I think, like, in the primary, we had an example, many Black people chose different candidates. To me, the difference between choosing Kamala or Joe or Warren, who we endorsed, or Bernie, those are real distinctions that we should debate about, that we should struggle around. But those distinctions are not distinctions that I'm willing to die on the hill for, when I know that after this election cycle, I'm building Black liberation with all these Black people.
Sometimes people who come to this work who say, I'm not for elections or I'm not for the electoral process, I think they do that for one of three reasons. One, we don't make it personal enough for them, right? Two, they got some hotep people who are just like, zero or nothing. We're not doing any of this. It's not gonna work. You with the man, go do that over there. we gotta love our people and have that conversation. Mo, am I right or am I wrong? And we gotta hold people's hand and say, look, I'm gonna love you through it. Or three, there's some people who just haven't been brought to the conversation yet, who don't have all the information. Again, I speak for all of us probably. None of us learned civic engagement or the electoral process in a real way in school. I learned this stuff because I was put in a real life situation where violence showed up at my door and I had to figure out the process so that we can end the violence, right? And so some of those people just need to be brought along in the conversation.
It's so vital. We have to have autonomous democratic organization in our communities that exists outside of the existing structures, right? That we have been trying to integrate effectively for like the past century or so or more, right? And that's important to recognize. When we're talking about like the electoral system, we're talking about a system that when it was first created, the way that they determined how representation was going to be in government was around defining enslaved people as 3/5 a person, okay? So we are integrating, we're trying to transform a system that was in a government that was fundamentally organized around our enslavement, right? So we're already alienated in many ways from that. But even beyond that, even when we, elect someone who we can't consider a comrade or someone who, has gone into the office promising to, put forward our agenda, again, the reality is that the system that they come up against is so highly organized that if we are not organized on our end to both support them and to continue pushing, it will be very difficult for that person to do anything with the levers that they have in that seat. But the important thing is, how do we find alignment to move things forward?
So I just really appreciated this panel. And the last thing I want to say is that we consistently have to spread the message around communities leading governance, around shifting the tide from community being governed to community actually doing the governing. And so we want to see more of people like the comrades that we know who have been out here organizing in the streets, getting into office, to be our delegates, who literally come back to community and say, how should I vote? How should I move? How should I decide? And so, that's the tide. That's where we want to see this go. That's part of why we created the space for the Black National Convention. And I just love y'all. I appreciate y'all. And just much, much, much gratefulness. Thank you.
I've spent my entire life in Los Angeles. By the time I was 18 years old, I knew that I wanted to do some sort of community organizing work. I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know what I was going to direct my energy towards, but I knew that what I had witnessed growing up in my community and neighborhood was completely unacceptable. The over-policing, the over-incarceration, the brutality, the torture, I wanted it to stop and I wanted it to end, and I wanted my communities to have peace. LA County was obsessed with incarcerating the people of LA County, and obsessed with incarcerating Black folks and Latino folks. I witnessed that in my own life, in my own family's life. What we realized is that the county was going to build a mental health jail. It was going to impact thousands and thousands of people who've been criminalized for their severe mental illness. We also understood that we needed a ballot measure. We needed the people of Los Angeles to come together and vote against incarceration and vote for accountability and vote against the Sheriff's Department's continued abuse of its community members. We decided to build out a ballot measure and call it reform LA jails. We gathered 175,000 signatures. We won that ballot measure, and we won 72% of the vote. 1.3 million Angelenos showed up to vote yes on Measure R. It was a community measure. It was the measure of the people. And we have seen how powerful and impactful it is when Black women survivors show up and fight for ourselves.
Hello, I'm Witch Prophet, and I'm going to perform a song called Musa off of my album called DNA Activation, produced by my lovely wife over here, Sun Sun. Here we go.
Peace, y'all, peace. This is Chef Les, 1/3 of the Bronx Collective, Ghetto Gastro. Today we highlighting Black August, which was a Ramadan-style fast that started in the late 70s after George Jackson and Qatari Golden were killed by the hands of California Correctional Facility officers. All these young men wanted to do was to free their minds, bodies, and souls by exercising their free right to read, to write, learn, educate themselves, and educate the ones around them as well. So today we're gonna do a dish composed of items from the commissary list, and they're all 100% plant-based, so let's get into it. Get yourself some angel hair pasta, get a pasta a good fry, get it some color. We're almost gonna caramelize the angel hair pasta. It's gonna bring out some sugar, some natural sugars from those carbohydrates, from the starches in there, and it'll give it a different texture as well. And now this pasta is nice and golden brown. I don't know if y'all can see this, man, but it's looking marvelous, man. Set that on the side. Let's roll. Fresh olive oil. Got some garlic, minced onions. That good chili pack from the ramen. Probably got a little bit of MSG in there, but it won't kill you. 1 pack of that. What you're doing, you're basically seasoning your oil. Got some good old yellow pepper. Let's boil this fried angel hair pasta until it's nice and soft. Doesn't take that long. We're gonna cook this till al dente, and al dente is to the bites. You don't want it to be too well cooked because it's gonna get sauteed again in another pan. Always make sure you season your waters that you're boiling or blanching or shocking. Season everything. Pull this to the side. Keep a little bit of your pasta water. Okay, so that's cooking down the peppers a little bit. You wanna add your pasta noodle. Got the good old garlic chili paste from the commissary. I don't know if anybody got a blender in your dorm, but if you do, you can always boil a little bit of the yellow pepper, blend it, and it'll give you this yellow pepper puree. Should be nice. A tiny bit more pasta water in there. There you have it, that chili garlic pasta. Finish it with some garlic chips for that texture. Finish it with a little bit more of that sodium. There you have it. So I hope you enjoyed this demonstration of this dish as much as I enjoyed whipping it up for y'all. Remember, they could keep your body locked down, but they can't keep your mind locked down, man. Stay safe, meditate, and perpetuate the things that you've learned, man. Because the world gonna keep turning, man. And these pots and pans, they gonna keep burning. Gang.
to get to the point of joy unspeakable is an aspiration. It's a desire.
We came together just through a free event after the Post nightclub massacre happened. And we just wanted to bring people together to feel safe.
I saw Ryan in the parking lot at this big party, and I was like, yo, our people are hurting right now. We should do a party. Just so folks can come together, because nobody really feels like going to the city right now. We're in pain. And I was like, I want to call it joy. And Ryan was like, all right, bet. We were like, wow, this was amazing. And it was beautiful and it was perfect. And it was just the way that everything came together was just phenomenal, and it blew our minds.
Brooklyn Boyhood is almost 10 years old. And we've just been doing this for a really long time. And to be able to do it with Ree, who just teaches us so much all the time, it's just a really special thing. I really love my people. You know, I feel like there have been a lot of times in life where I didn't feel, you know, good about myself and affirmed enough in my life. And when I get to have those moments, they really came through for me when I found community, a community of people that I really feel deeply connected to. So it just inspires me to want other people to have that access.
I can't even believe this little conversation in the parking lot became this movement, this thing that people need and people want and people look forward to.
Voter suppression is real. The last time I went to go vote, I had to open the polls myself. Yeah. They didn't even know how to log into the system. Now, I'm glad to do my part, but that should have never have happened. Gerrymandering, which means changing electoral districts to favor certain parties, voter roll purges are routine acts of suppression that we all know are happening in Black communities everywhere, every day. Black Voters Matter is one organization from right here in Atlanta doing the work to make sure every effort they encounter to shut us up is met with people ready to shut it down.
Conditions in itself are not the defining issue of whether you vote. We've got to get on the road and we've got to tell people the truth. Right. We got to be able to help them. We also got to move from this idea of some candidate's going to come save us. Right. Ain't no candidate come to save us. It's not fair to the candidate. It ain't fair to us. So we ain't hearing no excuses. We ain't taking no prisoners. And we want to turn towards the answers in the room, y'all. We here. We the ones we've been waiting on.
It's important to agree to take 5 friends to go and vote because Black voters matter.
We care and we came more than voting. We just want to remind you that we love you. You are not alone. We are standing in solidarity with you. Very excited to see the bus. I want to get on the bus.
I'm so excited about this tour. Finally, somebody is coming down south and seeing what we're about, right? And listening to the minds and souls and wishes of our folks to figure out where and how we need to govern and be.
We think that the way that you end voter suppression is that we've got to support the people on the front lines that are doing the work to stop it. But it really is about the future of this nation and the future of how we're going to go forward around making sure that every single person has access to the ballot. All right. Oh, I am excited. I'm ready. I am fired up.
Hi friends, my name is Mary Hooks and I'm with Southerners on New Ground.
Hey everybody, my name is Toni Michelle Williams. I am the Executive Director of the Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative.
SONG is a 28-year-old LGBTQ Southern organization and political home for LGBTQ folks that are looking for kinship, but is also looking to grow their leadership, to build campaigns, to confront power, that we can use that power
in order to change material conditions in our lives. In 2017, Song embarked on the Black Mama's Day bailout to bail out mothers right in time for Mother's Day. It was an ancestral mandate, and it was also a tactic to highlight the crisis of what was happening to Black women, queer and trans people who were languishing in cages because they were too poor to pay their bail.
What we wanted to do was offer a solution to the city of Atlanta. We wanted to ensure that folks who were experiencing homelessness, folks who were struggling with mental health issues and drug use had the support that they need. We knew that they did not deserve to be in a cage. So we offered a pre-arrest diversion initiative, which would again divert folks from jail and the criminal legal system and back into the services that they needed.
To accept this free call, press 1. To refuse this free call, thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
How you doing? Good, good. We're a part of a coalition. I'm Rukia Lumumba. I'm the executive director of the People's Advocacy Institute here in Jackson, Mississippi. And I'm one of the steering committee members and co-founders of the Mississippi Prison Reform Coalition. Parchman was around. It was a plantation right before Reconstruction. And immediately after Reconstruction, it became a prison. And I know that you know this information, but you know, it's time for it to go. No one should be sitting there. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your personal story around Parchman?
It's inadequate when it comes to rehabilitation. Parchman itself is not doing that. We would be in the field from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening. And the conditions, therefore, for doing it, we lived in humane conditions for no pay, free labor, you're getting nothing out of it. As far as the staff was highly untrained. You know, there's no mental state in her for us. There's no psychological evaluation done.
You know, so we've heard, you know, we've gotten reports and requests for assistance from folks who have also experienced severe medical neglect inside of Parchman and other Mississippi Department of Correction facilities.
The medical conditions are really horrible. That something happens, right? It takes a while for you to get medical treatment. It's like right now, pandemic. People are steady coming up positive.
People coming up positive inside?
Yeah.
So y'all only got one mask for the past 6 months.
A lot of masks have deteriorated. A lot of masks have came apart.
You know, Mississippi is one of the only states in the nation that still requires people to do over 80-something% of their time before they can even become parole eligible. Recently, the House and the Senate passed Senate Bill 2123, which would have allowed folks serving life sentences, folks serving sentences of many years, the opportunity for parole. But the governor vetoed it. You know, would you have been one of the folks that would have benefited from House Bill 2123 passing?
Yes, I would have been one of the guys that would have benefited from House Bill 2123.
Everybody's talking about Black people right now. But let me tell you something, baby. Black immigrants are damn near erased from the conversations about immigration in our country. You know the families that are locked up by ICE that you see on the news?
Kept in family detention centers.
Almost half of the family locked up right now are Haitian.
44% of the families in immigration detention right now are Haitian.
My family's Haitian, Haiti. And this is insane. This is devastating. And here's the real tea. Every shitty thing that happens in the immigration system is even shittier for Black immigrants, no matter what country they come from. Black immigrants are nearly 3 times more likely to be detained and deported on an alleged criminal offense.
Yep, we're just 7% of the non-citizen population in the US, but make up 20% of immigrants fighting deportation.
Why? Because Black communities are over-policed. and cops transfer immigrants to ICE. And there is no evidence that Black immigrants commit more crimes than any other immigrant population. Just so we're clear, no one should ever be locked up in a detention center.
But until COVID hit, ICE was busy detaining more people than ever, and for longer.
And you guessed it, the longest ICE incarcerations on record are all for Black immigrants. It's insane. Like the US automatically assumes that birth certificates and passports from African countries aren't legit. So they launch investigations, which keeps Black immigrants in detention for longer. And of course, African and Caribbean immigrants get put in solitary confinement way more than anybody else. 6 times more often. And if you're lucky enough to make bail, even our bonds are higher.
Bonds paid by Raíces for Haitian immigrants were 54% higher than the average bond amount.
And when it comes to Black immigrants seeking refuge, yep.
Haitians are second on the asylum denials list with an 86% rejection rate.
And not so long ago, asylum requests from Jamaicans were the most likely to be rejected. From beginning to end, every single aspect in the immigration system is nasty. But it's especially nasty if you're Black. Just like the police is so rooted in systemic racism that it can't be saved, the same goes for ICE. We need a reset button. It's time to abolish ICE and defund the police.
Now, at the top of this convention, you heard me say that all Black lives matter. Now, let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean, truly, all Black lives matter. All of them. Not just the ones you know and see. I mean, every single one of us. Black people who are disabled, addicted, non-binary, immigrants, of size, incarcerated, disabled, femme, parents, transgender, progressive, young, old, loud, quiet, all of us. We all matter. The reality is that our liberation is interconnected. Now, earlier this month, me and Ola Osaze, a brilliant organizer of the Black LGBTQ+ Migrant Project, got to check in and unpack one of the greatest barriers to all of our freedoms, toxic Western masculinity. Ola, how are you?
I'm doing well. You know, it's so great to be able to, share this space and have this this discussion with you.
I've been looking forward to this conversation really because it's necessary, it's important.
Yeah, this is, this question or this conversation around, masculinity in particular, especially for Black folks. I can't think of a more important question for us to be having right now, just given what we're seeing as far as, police violence and murders of Black folks. Our lives as Black queer people, as Black trans people are still being questioned, I was just trying to, dream of a Black masculinity that affirmed all life. As far as what dominant culture tells us is masculinity is defined by, rejection of femininity. It's defined by dominance. It's defined by subjugation of women, of trans folks, of feminine people. And this is not ours.
It's not ours.
It's not ours, As Black people, as Afro-descendant people, we have such a diverse and old sexuality and gender identities. And colonization brought this, toxic masculinity that, fuels this epidemic of violence against Black trans women in particular that we're seeing.
What you're bringing up for me is, and we talk about this, I personally express this often, is that white masculinity, Western European masculinity is cowardly. And it's a weird subversion, right? Because the masculinity that they sell, the representation of it is one that is fearless, that is brave, that is solitary, that can go and conquer, exploit, and be on conquest and dominate at every time. But their masculinity is cowardly. It's really afraid of anything that looks different. It's afraid of being doubted. It's afraid of being questioned. It's afraid of conflict. And so everything that it does is try to erase an other. erase something that doesn't look like it, because what it does is it shines a light on how feeble it actually is, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't want to include other conversations.
How much am I embodying this white supremacist idea of masculinity? You know, how much am I bringing this into my relationships, into my interactions with people, into the ways, into the kind of community I build around myself? Am I in community with folks who are queer and trans identified? If not, what is that barrier? What is preventing me from doing that? Because we need to be more in community with each other. We need to get more intimate with the complexities and the context of each other's lives and experiences, because, you know, Blackness is diverse.
If I had one thing that I wanted to say to any male identified, cisgender, meaning you present as one way, heterosexual male watching this, watching Phil, watching Ola, is if you really want to be about that work, you're the most radical revolutionary cat in the world. This is a part of it, and you can't separate it.
You know, there's always challenges, but that means there's opportunities. There's always walls. That means we're either going to paint them or take them down. I'm Cindy Ayers, and I'm the owner of Footprint Farms, a full 68-acre vegetable and animal livestock farm. Before 2010, I was actually an investment banker in New York, traveling the country, actually the world, and dealing with finance. Since 2010, I've been farming. Since 2005, I've been back into my home state of Mississippi. I had no idea it would be a full-fledged farm, but right now it is, right here in the great city of Jackson. Here at Footprint, we do a lot of partnering. We do a lot with other organizations coming in to make ourselves and the community stronger by blending together. We have several great partnerships, Rosemont Church being one. We're proud to say Jackson Public Schools, we were able to work with them during this crisis of delivering food, not just to the schools, but to the families of our scholars. We're teaching the community and others how to grow their own food and to use the food in the community to help advance our efforts in not having enough fresh vegetables in our communities. I'm so proud of the food movement and the movement work that's happening throughout this country, and especially in this state, looking at making a difference, because it's about health, it's about wealth. Those two go hand in hand. You know, being born in America, a Black female in Mississippi, and loving your state and understanding your history puts up a lot of barriers. I look at this as my duty, as my mission to make a difference in this time, in this space, with this work. This is a great world. We need to keep it safe. We need to keep it healthy, and we need to do more to make a difference in everyday life.
My name is Sekou Nkabazi Abdullah Odinga, former founding member of the New York State Black Panther Party and also a former political prisoner of war.
What is a political prisoner?
A political prisoner basically is someone who has been incarcerated by a government for their political beliefs, or someone who supports the war I'm talking about is the war of national liberation, specifically of people of African descent. The prisoner of war actively resisted, usually with arms, or was a supporter of those who actively resisted with arms.
Can you talk a little bit about this concept of Black August and what it means to you?
To me, it's a remembrance of the struggle of Black people, not only in August, but specifically acts that happened in August. But what Black August itself is a time for those of us who relate to the liberation of our people through any means, all means, to remember acts of national liberation, acts of trying to produce something for our people.
How many years were you incarcerated?
33.
33. Speak a little bit about how important was it for Black community to be visibly working on your behalf?
It's a connection to the struggle, first of all, for those that's in prison. It allows them to know that the work that they were doing and continue to do from behind the wall, it means something, and it's appreciated. People give you that will to go on, to continue to struggle. They give you the resources to continue to struggle. If the brothers and sisters in the prisons today can get that real support, a lot of them can get out. They won't have to die in these prisons. So many have already died in these prisons.
What's your message primarily to young Black people who have had enough, are prepared to organize in ways that they haven't been before? What can they learn from you? What would be your message to them?
Just what you just said, organize. Come together with like-minded people and organize for change. The power truly belongs to the people. When we say all power to the people, all power can be in the people's hands if they take it. They have to organize themselves to take it, but it can be done.
Project Greenlight is a mass surveillance program in Detroit. My name is Tawana Petty, and I am a lifelong Detroiter. I am a mother, I'm an organizer, and I direct the data justice program for Detroit Community Technology Project. We are being monitored by 3 real-time crime surveillance programs, monitored 24/7 by Detroit police, including the use of facial recognition technology. We've talked to senior citizens, we've talked to young people, and when we asked them a time when they felt safe, none of them referenced law enforcement or surveillance. The narrative that's being pushed by law enforcement and city government is what's preventing us from having our imagination. If you've taken a state ID in the state of Michigan since 1999, your ID is in a facial recognition database. And there are no regulations in place to control how they're using these technologies. We already have 2 misidentification cases, Robert Williams and Michael Oliver. The fact that Project Greenlight was leveraged to issue tickets to residents who are already in poverty during COVID-19 for not social distancing, which isn't a crime, lets you know that they are going to abuse this technology. Project Greenlight is essentially pay for policing. Businesses are incentivized to sign up for Project Greenlight because they're made priority 1. Businesses are being pinned against residents for police service. Our law enforcement has been traveling across the globe trying to pocket this and roll it out in other cities. We know that if we do not succeed in fighting this off in Detroit, in the largest Black Mecca in the United States, that there really isn't much hope for Black and brown people and poor white people across the globe. Quality of life issues are the reasons why we have quality of life crimes in our neighborhoods. And we know that if we divest from mass surveillance budgets and militarized policing, and we put those resources in our neighborhoods, then we can minimize crime. We have a campaign called Green Chairs, Not Green Lights, where we're asking community members to come back to the front porches, to look out for one another, to not pursue surveillance and not pursue criminalization of their neighbors. We need to ban facial recognition, not just in Detroit, but across the world. We need to end Project Greenlight before it gets even further out of control. And we need to make sure that this is not replicated in any other city with any other population and have their civil liberties eroded like ours have been.
You are a storm without form. You have no clue that your lips are stayed blue, stayed blue. Don't you try to hide, 'cause ain't it lonely on the eyes?
think the moment for me was the night after the first protest in New York. All I said to myself is, I have to go. And I shot it like it was the only protest in the world, like it was my only chance. I mean, you name it, it was happening. From people getting arrested, to fights with the police, to violence, to peaceful protesting, it was all there. And I had no idea that we will still be documenting. There's probably like 10, 15 protests happening today, and we're 40+ days later. It's stressful. I've been through a lot, from being punched in the face to spending 8 hours in jail, but it's not gonna stop me. I'm still gonna continue to do what I do because I feel like this is the most important work of my entire career. You know, I cannot stop going outside. I can't stop risking my life. I can't stop making sure that these marches and these protests and these anti-protests, I can't stop making sure they're documented. I go out and I see a lot more photographers, and I see a hell of a lot more Black photographers. And that, to me, means a lot. There's one powerful image, and it's just this young man's fist, all encompassing of what is going on. We are one. This is us. This is Black. I feel like photographing children that have been a part of the movement is very important. What we're doing is for them. It's for us, but it's for them. They are literally the future. And for me, I have a child. I have a 2-year-old. I took him down to Richmond with me, and it was risky. But it comes to a point where you just can't be scared of these people. You cannot back down from racism. You can't back down from white supremacy. You have to keep fighting. You have to keep doing what you want to do in the name of freedom, in the name of equality, in the name of respect.
These pictures are so beautiful, Mel. Thank you for letting us set the stage for this convention with your work, and for giving me excuse for an outfit change. The images we see so often decide how we understand people and the world. As a Black trans woman, I get questions all day, every day that let me know you don't see us enough. You don't hear us when we speak, and a lot of you only care about saying our names after we die. The way patriarchy works makes our work as Black people so much harder. It forces us into corners of judgment and violence. It limits us. That's true for me, and it's true for you. The less we see our struggles and liberations as connected, the farther we have to go. Thank you to everyone documenting, archiving, and collecting the stories that we need to tell.
Hey.
Oh, hi. How are you?
I'm glad to be in conversation with you today. So I told us we were supposed to start by introducing ourselves, or like talking about who we are. I'm a born and raised Chicagoan. I'm a Black feminist, abolitionist. I organize through what many of us call a Black queer feminist lens. And over the past 15 years or so, a little bit over 15 years, I've been involved in movement building across this country, connecting with people across the world. The stuff that I care most about is engaging people in conversations and visioning and like imagination that stretches beyond what this place, this world tells us is possible.
I became aware of your work while I was incarcerated. Every time you would be on like PBS, I would be like, I just became like kind of like your fan because, so I guess to give context, I didn't know a lot of radical Black feminists, and you were the first person who I'd seen talk about abolition on TV. And I was like, oh, like, this is a thing. Like this, people talk about this. Charlene knows about this. This is real. So anyway, I say all that to say, one, to just express my fanship, but also to say, how did you first start thinking about these things? How did you first start connecting feminism to abolition and to your work?
I really started to develop my identity and my politics and my values as a Black feminist when I was like in my early 20s. The first time I even heard of the concept of abolition, and specifically the abolition of the prison industrial complex, was from my friends, my homie Asha Ransby Sporn. And I remember hearing her talk about abolition, and I had never heard about it. It was at the BYP 100 convening, the first one we had. And I was just like, oh, this is a thing. And I was on to like ending mass incarceration, which is not the same as abolishing carceral systems or the prison industrial complex, right? Ending mass incarceration is like, let's just lower the population, but don't actually deal with why we put people in these cages and what we do with people when they're no longer in prisons. And so it's been a journey. It's been a journey. And to be completely honest with you, Richie, abolition has become most real to me in moments of conflict, of violence, of people enacting harm against other people, right? And me in moments where I have harmed other people. That is where abolition becomes most real to me. What about you?
I first and foremost identify as somebody who's formerly incarcerated. I think that's important to say because there will be a day where there will be no such thing as formerly incarcerated people anymore. I'm a producer and an organizer, meaning that I just try to make things that culturally lead us towards the abolition of prisons and patriarchy.
I visited some prisons. I'm not formally incarcerated. I don't know that experience. I don't know the experience that you have. And I always think of prisons as sites of patriarchal violence in so many ways, and how they reproduce ways that we shouldn't be treating people.
It's all based in the patriarchal idea of domination as power. And that is how we take our power back when we have been harmed, is by dominating. So we can do it in the interpersonal, and we can do it systemically. You hurt us, and therefore we are now going to banish you to physical, sexual, emotional, financial torture. And somehow that domination gives me healing or makes up for the wound that you caused me.
In our last conversation, in preparation for this, you talked about how you talk to the other folks on the inside with you about patriarchy. And one of the things you said was, you try to relate to people based on you have a sister, you have a mother, you have a friend, you have a partner. And in movement, over and over again, I hear people say, you shouldn't have to have a girlfriend, a daughter, or whatever in order to treat somebody well. And I found it just really compelling to hear you say that actually that works.
When we're talking to men inside who have literally I can only have emotions maybe with my mom or girlfriend or whoever, and then I have to go back into the prison and have no emotions. Or I see this woman over here as somebody who is sexually exploitable, and this woman over here as they're breaking up themselves. We're compartmentalizing ourselves at that point. So using feminist conversation as a way of transforming harmful behavior, it's all very centered in how does this serve your highest self? And what we found was helpful was to say, it doesn't serve your highest self to be breaking up yourself into a bunch of little pieces and relating to people in different ways. So if if feminine people deserve respect, then feminine people deserve respect. That's and right. We might use different femmes in their lives as examples to just show them how they've been compartmentalizing, but really the conversation is about being in integrity and being one person.
Patriarchy sorts us. People talk about how white supremacy sorts people, and particularly how white supremacy sorts Black people. White supremacy sorts people along lines of race, gender, class, all of that.
Something that I've learned from you, something that I've learned from so many of the Black radical feminists that have come before us, is the difference between Black feminism and white feminism is that white feminism sees the system and says, women just need a seat at the table. And Black feminism says, fuck this table. This table is actually harming everybody, and we're building a new table, or rather, we're going back to the table that we had before colonialism, when we had community and we had equity.
When I think about the possibilities of Black feminisms, I think about the expansiveness. It's about all of us. And we still have to work towards that because we all live within a world that is deeply patriarchal, a world that is deeply transphobic, deeply capitalist, ableist, xenophobic, all of the things. And so it's Black feminism is a way through that. It's so big, just like Blackness, just full of possibilities. And I do believe it is a part of our yellow brick road, towards our North Stars. That's what it is.
That was a mic drop moment.
But I just really appreciate the work that you do, because you went into the belly of one of our beasts and you chose to do something that is helping to transform people. And like, you're helping to save lives, not just the men's lives, but the lives that they're going to interact with in the rest of the world. So thank you.
The honor is mine. It's an honor to be in movement with you, because I know for a fact we gonna win. And yeah, and a large part of that is gonna be based on your work and what you give to the world. So thank you.
Chomber era un cangrejero negro quien en sus años primarios preguntó a su maestra: profesora, dígame algo sobre la historia de los negros en Puerto Rico. Y la profesora con toda candidez le contesta: los negros no tienen historia. Eso motivó a Chomber a buscar la aportación de los negros al mundo. Comienzan a salir en estos años muchos datos importantes sobre aportaciones que habían hecho muchos negros en Puerto Rico y que la historia los había escondido. Entonces nos pareció que era importante comenzar a integrar distintas disciplinas para conocer un poco más de las aportaciones que habían hecho muchos puertorriqueños negros y que aún se mantenían escondidas.
Por la cuestión esta que está pasando ahora, de este racismo extraño que está como que bien rampante, y de los 2 o 3 zánganos que por ahí como que se vayan a ofender porque diga negra, porque aquí en Puerto Rico tú le dices negra a alguien y no es malo, pero que allá el tú decirle negra a alguien a veces es como ofensivo. Describo mis diseños como son recordatorios para la mujer puertorriqueña, la mujer negra, la mujer luchadora. Esos son la línea por la cual me voy cuando empiezo a trabajar con los diseños de Afrolunática.
Soy nosotros, nosotras, soy uno, una. La misma tribu, la misma aldea, un batey que danza con el repicar de las palabras.
Somos siendo la raza, la tribu, la patria, la nobleza. Somos las caras lindas de clara poesía.
Que gritaron libertad y respondieron discrimen. Todavía ser negro es crimen en la libre sociedad.
Hello, everybody. I'm really excited about this panel on racial capitalism, a huge topic that we need to be talking about. I'm so glad that this is a topic at the Black National Convention of 2020 put on by the Movement for Black Lives. I'm Nalini Stamp, and I'm joined here by an amazing panel of guests, and we are going to get right into it. And I'm gonna start, Barbara, I'm gonna turn the first question to you. We're gonna start you off, but what does racial capitalism mean for everybody who's watching at home?
What does it mean? Well, yeah, I'm excited to be a part of this panel too, and Nalini, thank you for being our moderator and guiding us through. So, I think there are a lot of competing and nuanced definitions of racial capitalism, but I would say, simply put, it's kind of the inextricable link and reinforcing relationship between capitalism, which we understand is an economic and political system based on profit, private ownership, markets, and exploitation, and white supremacy, which is rooted in colonialism, conquest, slavery, and genocide. That is, Black bodies, the theft of Black bodies and the theft of Indigenous land were the pillars, the rocks upon which modern capitalism was built. You know, our ancestors' labor fueled the formation of capitalism. So it's really inseparable. Now, when we trace back the origins of the term, it is used in South Africa under the apartheid regime to talk about the nature of the white capitalist elite in South Africa, but is also used by my late friend and comrade and colleague Cedric Robinson in his masterpiece Black Marxism, which is a sort of a critique of Marxism more than just a sort of advocacy piece. But Cedric talks about ways in which racialism, the racialization of oppressed minorities, actually preceded the formation of capitalism. So the relationship is intimate and inextricable. Sometimes people talk about racial capitalism as like there's capitalism over here and then there's racial capitalism. But Robin Kelly, every time I'm in a conversation with Robin Kelly, is like, we don't even have to say racial capitalism, that's redundant. The reason we say it is that sometimes some of our friends on the white left talk about a raceless form of capitalism, right? Talk about class without also adding that component of white supremacy and race, which has been the underpinning, the ideological underpinning and fuel of capitalism in the world, but particularly in this country.
Malkia, so we heard a little bit about the definition and some of the origins. Thank you, Barbara, for getting us there. How have you seen racial capitalism evolve from some of the origins that Barbara kind of pointed out? How has it evolved and how are we talking about it right now in 2020?
Right. I mean, okay, so capitalism has always transformed itself through technical revolutions, right? But what I think is important is that there's one idea that, technology has somehow made capitalism more gentle, easier to manage. But the reality is capitalism has never been questioned or threatened by these technical revolutions, right? It remains as fearsome as ever, right? On the contrary, in fact, it grows stronger through these technical revolutions. In the 21st century, we're dealing with what some call a global digital economy that has emerged and it exacerbates the conflicts, the crises, the injustices that late stage capitalism can produce.
Capitalism evolved out of feudalism hundreds of years ago, and now I think it's having a crisis that cannot really be resolved. So, financialization is a part of that. The financialization of capital, meaning, banks and hedge fund guys who are betting on the future, that's their commodity, are making enormous amounts of wealth, which sort of breaks down the formula of exploitation. And then climate. Climate, capitalism is an infinite growth model economy on a finite planet. So they've sort of pillaged and plundered as much as they can pillage and plunder.
Can I share too also, please?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Very talkative bunch.
Racial capitalism means that those in power are benefiting from the racialized oppression of Black people. And this can be in many ways, but I will be talking about one of the many. Wage theft is how rich people keep their unearned wealth. And it happens by employers stealing our precious time in labor without pay. I had a boss who was always late to come home. So not only was I staying at work longer without overtime pay, but I was also paying for my daughter to remain in daycare longer. It's like they were robbing me twice. Wage theft is also a big issue for many low-wage workers, most of whom are Black. It's estimated that at least $15 billion are stolen wages every year. And most of these employers are now criminalized. But if you steal a bag of chips as a Black person, you go to jail right away, or you can even lose your life.
That's right.
Real talk.
Thank
Facts.
you. An example of, and no, thank you. And an example of, and this is a question also that you can answer, just like, how have people been organizing around it, right? You're just saying that in your workplace, how you've been treated, and National Domestic Workers are one of the organizations that organizes around racial capitalism. But, wanted to just pose to folks, and Renee as well, include you because you haven't spoken yet. But yeah, how are people organizing around it right now?
I would say that, so many people are organizing against racial capitalism. And I would say it primarily happens in two ways. There are those that know that they're fighting capitalism, and there are those who are trying to make capitalism or reform capitalism and make it a nicer, friendlier version of what it currently is. For those of us who are committed to Black liberation, I think that we have to be honest about the fact that capitalism will never work for Black folks, period.
That's right. That's right.
That should be pretty apparent. And so if that is the case, we have to take an anti-capitalist lens to our work, to our organizing work. So what I would say is that, so many folks, so many of our campaigns are really about eradicating racial capitalism. The Cancel Rent campaign, the Fight for 15 campaign, all the work that the National Domestic Workers have been doing, all of the folks who are organizing around Black labor rights, but also, folks who are doing a lot of the resist work. Obviously, the carceral state is very much about the exploitation of Black bodies, right? And one of the things that I think is really important for us to point out as we continue to do this work is to be more explicit about the connections between police violence and state-sanctioned violence and the state-sanctioned economic violence that we all experience every day as Black people in this country.
Yes.
And they have always been linked and intertwined. We know that the beginning of the police is wrapped up in the slave patrols and in trying to squash the labor rights movements in the North. And it has just evolved. And so trying to, again, make those connections between state-sanctioned economic violence and police violence, I think, is really important at this moment. And so when we think about things like abolition or getting rid of the police state, that is fundamentally a question about how do we not only get rid of the police, but how do we redo the economy in ways that actually support a better way and actual safety for our people.
So with that, what is in our way and who are our opponents?
We need to understand that this two-party system, at least since I've been aware of politics, right, has been at the heart of maintaining this economic system. It's not a Republican story. And if we think it's just a Republican story, then you've fallen for the okie doke, right? So it is a Republican and a Democratic story. One, both beholden to Wall Street, both beholden to Silicon Valley, both beholden to a certain kind of capitalist industry, oligarchs who want to control power. So we need to understand that when we're working within these political parties, that we have to really, really work hard. And that is not fall for the tinkering around the edges, because precisely, and here I'm echoing Barbara, they've been tinkering around the edges while they've been locking us up, throwing us in, we can go down the list. We're falling deeper into poverty, blah, 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 blah.
What we need to think about is not how do we come up with a peace force that the city then controls, but how do we create smaller institutions that actually serve us, that we're in control of, that provide for our public safety, right? How do we actually think about a campaign that goes something like co-ops, not cops, right? Similar to what they were doing in Seattle, right? Because essentially what they were doing, like, we're gonna create literally a few square blocks where we don't need police. And part of that vision was not just that we have to get the police out of here, that we need people to serve for our safety, but that we have to provide food. We have to provide for joy. We have to provide for all the things. We have to provide for housing. And that was just like one small experiment of trying to get to, I think, what we envision, what freedom would feel like, look like. How can we engage differently with each other? How do we transform ourselves and right, the different institutions that are actually now serving us?
Barbara, and then I'm going to end us with a nice little note, and then we're done. Barbara.
Well, so much clarity and brilliance already. I would say study, struggle, and serve. Study for clarity, struggle to move the needle, and serve to deepen our own humanity so that we're ready for a post-capitalist world.
Yes. Well, there we go. And of course, if it is me, I'm going to end this in a little one line of a song, because it wouldn't be an Alini panel if we didn't. But we gotta go down to the rich man's house. So we went down to the rich man's house, and I took back what he stole from me. Took it back
we went down to the rich man's house and we took back what he stole from me. Took it back. Took it back. Well, it's under my feet, under my feet, under my feet, under my feet. Ain't gonna let no system walk all over me. Thank you, y'all, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. All right.
Y'all.
I love it.
This was great.
That was dope.
What has been continuously stolen from us time and time again is our ability to have generational wealth.
You had a place of African-American prominence in 18 hours destroyed in an act of state-sanctioned terrorism.
A court case was filed, it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court had the audacity to say that the statute of limitations has run out.
Back in 2001, Professor Charles Ogletree thought this case could be a watershed moment in American history, in American legal jurisprudence, for reparations for all African Americans.
Because we're not just talking about Greenwood, you're talking about people who came from all over the South, who worked on plantations, who slaved, who lost their parents, don't even know who their parents are, had to be adopted, whose families were broken down. The whole structure and idea of your humanity was attacked on every level. And you still managed to maintain some level of sanity, some level of spiritual wherewithal that gave you the ability to say, I'm still here. I can still define myself. I can still create for myself. But what does reparations look like for people who have done that?
I don't need you to give me anything. What I need you to do is give us what we're owed as it relates to reparations at the local level for massacres that took place, like what took place in Tulsa, as well as chattel slavery in this country. Because the good thing about it is it has been researched. So it's just a matter of implementing what those national experts have said.
They said direct payments to the survivors, direct payments to the descendants, scholarships for descendants, business incubation for African American businesses, and a memorial for what happened. None of those recommendations have been honored. But it takes people, fighting. That's why we go out every Wednesday, our Bible and Bullhorn, demanding reparations. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next year, but now.
Taking the YOLO, the high road to the no-shows, and all the hosts know it's hot out here for the hobos, the homos and the almost, and all the black folks. Yeah, she went for the dolo. She took all of the solos, and all my bros know that I propose no. But I'm glad it was a no-go. Oh no, no.
Yeah, it really feels like we coming into a real sacred space right now. I could just feel the energy coming from the land right now, And it's massive too when you look and you see it's almost breathtaking to see the sheer number of tombstones that's here.
Right.
And also know that it's but a drop in the bucket of the carnage.
Yeah, another really grounding part of this Say Their Name cemetery is that when the Mother's March happened a few weeks ago, Black mothers of the movement came here and honored their children here, came to their tombstones, right?
Right.
Tamir Rice, his mama, laid some love items at his tombstone. So to have mothers from across the country honor their children right here, sacred, like you said, grounding.
To me, that changes the energy of this space significantly.
Yes.
It changes the energy and it makes it you know, much more of a memorialized space.
My name is Ashley Woodard Henderson, and I'm the first Black woman executive director of the Highlander Research and Education Center in New Market, Tennessee. Since 1932, we've been a catalyst for social movements, bringing people together across difference to figure out how to be protagonists of social movements and building social good for all people across this country. It's a place where historically folks like Septima Clark and Rosa Parks came to train and lead. It's a place where Martin Luther King and John Lewis came to study. John Lewis's first integrated mill was at the Highlander Center. And we've been bringing people together under the methodology of popular education to learn new knowledge that could only exist if these people came and sat down together to learn with and from each other, and then take that new knowledge back home with them to change the material conditions of our people. We are excited to be a place of rest and respite, a place of strategy development, leadership development, and training for the social movements of this country. On March 29th, 2019, I awoke to a call informing me that our administrative offices at Highlander were fully engulfed in flames.
It was early Friday when the center's main office burned down in Jefferson County. The first report was of a brush fire. Later, we learned it was a fire at the Highlander Center, which for decades has trained community activists.
What I came to understand later in the day is that a symbol that was spray painted on our parking lot the same day as the fire was connected to the white power movement. That same symbol in my parking lot, we found out later, was also etched into the gun that the white supremacist terrorist used when he attacked people in Christchurch, New Zealand. What I know for sure is that social movements like the Movement for Black Lives, the Black liberationist movement of the 21st century in this country, is giving me all the hope that I need to believe that those white supremacist attacks that are meant to scare us and not do any more work, that are meant to destroy the infrastructure that for generations our people have built, is going to fail. And I know that because I'm seeing the victories of the work continue since that very day on March 29th to 2020. I'm excited about continuing to flank and support, be innovative, and contagiously in love with Black people until the day that we win and never have to weather a storm like this again.
Our organizations are building power. Community organizing works. Black organizers in St. Louis have successfully closed an inhumane jail that caged our people. We have elected progressive leaders and passed policies, including Medicaid expansion and raising the minimum wage. And just recently, we unseated a Black entrenched incumbent and are electing the first Black woman from the state of Missouri to Congress. Congratulations, Cori Bush. I'm gonna keep it real. We need everyone and every tool. From protesting to the polls, we are fighting to be heard. We protest, we vote, we write policy, and we show up for accountability and governance. And we find celebration in our collective. Before, on, and well after Election Day, Black people will win. Elections have the power to mitigate the harm done to our communities. And right now, Black movement is providing a home to dig in deep every single day. Join us.
My name is Aya Brown. I'm an artist. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I'm 24 years old. All of my drawings start on brown paper. The paintings too, they start on some sort of color, whether it's black, brown. I choose brown paper because I feel like I shouldn't be drawing Black bodies from whiteness, that we do not start from whiteness. What really triggered this experience, this series, because COVID happened and I was able to be really reflective on what essential worker is, because the people that are outside my window still going to work are these Black women. the woman who's at Seatown working. Like, she's probably been here since she started working and has nonstop, bagging stuff. Nobody's even thinking about like how essential this young Black woman is. The first one I made was a nurse. And I was thinking about my experience as a kid, going to the pediatrics and like how comfortable that nurse made me. She had on like a SpongeBob scrub and she had on like really fly sneakers, would have tattoos, and she spoke the way I did. The lady who just rung my doorbell because I have a package, I was able to document my friend Kiana. She's an EMT worker. Also rolled into me like seeing Black women who are essential on the street or outside and going up to them. Can I please draw you? Also uplifting them. So the engagement became more than just me sharing it, instead having these moments where I can engage with these women that I admire and think about so much and that the world should also be looking at. This is a drawing I made of Ayana Dior, a Black trans woman who was brutally beaten by 15 to 30 Black cis men in Minnesota. For many of the same reasons why like the George Floyd thing triggered a lot of people is because you have like visual. I watched like 5 seconds of it and I was just like, I cannot sit through this. I just wanted to make something that highlighted this story and understand that Black trans women are a part of our community, period.
Intra-communal violence, my work is largely around ending sexual violence, and it started with and continues to be for and censor Black and brown women and girls. And my experience in that has largely been around dealing with intracommunal violence, meaning that the harm that we experience has been largely dealt at the hands of other people who look like us. And that happens, and that is, the caveat I always try to give is that there's no special depravity in the Black community. There's no reason why Black people have a propensity towards violence or sexual violence. Is that intracommunal violence happens, in its very definition, is that people commit harm towards the people who live closest to them, who they're in community with. And so in every single community, in every ethnicity, every demographic you look at, there's violence within those same communities, higher rates of violence in those same communities. I think because of our history in this country as Black people, there is a special sort of attention we have to pay to how intracommunal violence plays out in our communities and the ways that we replicate the harm that has been enacted upon us with each other. So, the phrase Black on Black crime became incredibly popular, I don't know how long ago, but it's been popular for a long time, but it's used mostly as a way for either Black people to point the finger at other Black people and assign blame, or people outside of our community to assign blame to us for the harm that other people caused, that the roots of harm came from outside of our community. But in some ways, we have to, and I just had this conversation last night on another panel. In some ways, I think for us to, when we talk about who does it implicate, is we have to have family, community conversations about intracommunal violence that takes away the gaze of anybody else, particularly white people, and how we think about and strategize around what a solve looks like and what liberation even looks like in the full picture without thinking about how other people define it. And so the challenge that I come across all the time in my work is not having the space. Like, we really don't even have the real estate to have a robust conversation about the realities of sexual violence as an intracommunal violent act in our community without it automatically being some kind of implication towards Black men. And so I am constantly faced with the challenge of having Black women who feel erased and not seen and not heard, and then having people in our community who identify across the gender spectrum who are completely invisible, because we can't have any of those conversations without Black men feeling implicated in that, as opposed to feeling like they're part of the solution. They can be a part of the solution. They can be a part. If we can have community conversations, if we can have intracommunal violence, then we can have intracommunal solutions. And that means that we can have conversations with each other and start thinking about other systems of accountability, start thinking about ways that folks who cause harm can be accountable outside of, the crime and punishment framework that we've all been indoctrinated with. And it's difficult, to be quite honest, because it does feel like, for a lot of people, an indictment of another group. Like, in order for me to be accountable, for me to call you to be accountable, I have to blame the whole group, kind of thing. So it's a difficult conversation. It's one that I think requires a lot of compassion and grace and thoughtfulness and space. We need space and time to really unravel and move away from the ways that we've been socialized to think about harm, and move towards more of a harm and harm reduction framework that I think would be most useful in our communities.
Intra-communal violence calls us to consider the ways that our particular communities, whether it's the Black community, for me, it's also considering the LGBTQ plus community, considering feminist spaces, right? I think that when we talk about intracommunal violence, it's about looking at the ways that we are indoctrinated with this idea that we should expect harm and we shouldn't expect accountability for it. So when I think about what needs to happen, I think about us having the capacity to hold not just the state violence conversation, which has, I think, dominated the airspace for the movement for Black lives, but also being able to understand that folks are experiencing violence in our homes, from our families, from our loved ones, from our parents, and we can't be silent about those things.
When we think back, when I was young, when I was growing up, I was taught to be, violent, and it wasn't necessarily really with the intent to really cause harm and injury to any one person. But I was taught that if someone hit you, you was taught to hit them back, and in my, growing up, and then all other lessons were put into our heads. And as a result of such, we began to really focus on the people who look like us most as the problem versus the real person and those individuals and certain infrastructures that are responsible for causing a lot of the things that make us want to really act out on each other.
We all have lived in a society that has indoctrinated us with very devastating and harmful ideas around humanity and around who deserves to be seen as human. For Black trans people, and particularly Black trans women, it has been very difficult to navigate many spaces in the Black community, many spaces within movement, because we are often met with justifications for why we may experience discrimination or violence. This idea that if you are non-conforming in any way, that you are bringing about the harm that may be inflicted on you is not okay.
I talk about the spectrum of sexual violence a lot, and that people ask me, is this part of Me Too or is this sexual violence? And the way I think about it is everything from words and how we communicate to murder, right? That all fall in this huge spectrum. And people often dismiss words or harassment, but don't realize that with the way that we communicate and talk to each other, oftenly in violent ways, create the space for physical harm and violence to happen.
When I think about, how do we organize around this? To me, what really sits in the middle is the question of, what do we need to come out of this different? What do we really need to move to our greater selves? And I think part of that question is going to be answered inside of the Black community by not only thinking about how we're going to treat each other different, but us all together willing to be defined a new us, right? Being willing to say, we got to reconstruct how we think of masculinity. What parts of this are harmful? What parts of this is toxic? We've got to reimagine and restructure how we even think of what it means to be straight. Not because I'm saying everybody is, having sexual relationships, with people of the same sex or same gender, because I'm saying something about how we cause violence to people who we think break our sense of normal, right? And we even as Black folks have to take on the work and say, what is normal? Even take that on a step further and say, really, what's healthy, right? How am I in right relationship with you as my lover, as my child, as my parent, as a person who I don't know, but who is part of this broader community?
I'd look at the concept of intracommunal violence a little different. I look at it as a learned behavior versus, something that is innate, something that I believe that none of us are born violent. And so if that be the case, then we had to pick this behavior up somewhere along the line in our lives. And when you look at it as a whole, I mean, when you look at what has happened to us as a people and how we've been, taken away very, violently away from our ancestry and placed into a foreign land in some aspects, and been taught how to be violent. I look at it from that perspective as to, who is the perpetrators of this, right? Versus the victim. And I look at it as more so that there is a underlining sort of oppressor. There is a underlining or a hidden hand. Someone is throwing a rock, but they're hiding their hand, and they're not taking responsibility for some of the behaviors that they have instilled on us. And so what we are doing is really acting out of our character and really playing into a larger scheme and a larger plan, so to speak, which is really not ours to actually own. And I think that it's just something that, again, that we need to really place it back on the hands and at the footsteps of those who are really responsible.
The truth of this work is that, and I think this is part of why it's so difficult for us as Black folks, is that it may not be our fault that we're here, but it is still our responsibility to end it. When I think about myself and I think about how I felt justified and righteous and some of the things that I've done in my own life where I may have caused harm to somebody, and I may have felt justified that so-and-so had it coming, and maybe they did, right? But it still was my responsibility as a person who believed in something different for our folks to behave differently.
We don't have to just, daydream about what the future can look like. In the spaces that we have control over in our schools, in our communities, in our organizations, we can create those systems. We can create these examples of, new systems of accountability and try them out and talk about them and share them with people and write about them, right? And so that we can start experimenting in ways that we have control over what something different can look like.
Because we've got a great city, and we're going through difficult times. So to ignore that, obviously, would be blind to reality. And celebrate our people would also be an injustice as well. Really, nothing more fundamental than people having a stable, affordable home.
It was the week that we had found out that Breonna Taylor's death was connected to gentrification. We believe that gentrification is one of the biggest ways that Black people are dismantled and are one of the biggest issues for Black people in Louisville in this current state. What we learned is that they wanted to buy many homes in that area, and that was a part of their plan, and that kind of initiated this need to get her out of that area. On her birthday, they bought the home for $1. So it just was very heartbreaking because her life was worth way more than $1. Black life is worth way more than $1, especially with how much we contribute to the United States in general, but specifically Louisville, Kentucky. So people were already angry about that and heartbroken about that and sad about that. So when we found out there was a new, supposed to be low income housing that was being celebrated in the midst of finding out that her death was connected to gentrification, we were angry about that. We're not gonna allow you all to do this and be silent.
As we were walking up, Tala just handed me the banner, so I made my way to the front. Mayor Fisher was speaking right then. Everybody got really, really quiet. And that's when I really started getting a little nervous though, you know what I'm saying? Like, all right, here we go. Them nerves start to kick in a little bit. And I honestly expected him to turn around or acknowledge us or something. You know, he spoke for probably another 15, 20 seconds, and I was just like, what are we doing? So, you know, I just started the chant, fire, fire, gentrifier, and we started making noise.
Having a stable, affordable home.
The feeling of him getting off the podium was gratifying, but also unexpected. I was surprised that he just like gave it, just wrote up his papers and sat down.
It was so beautiful because it was unknown.
Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate you so much. This moment we're in couldn't have higher stakes. To learn more about the Movement for Black Lives, visit blacknovember.org.
So we are right now in the midst of an unprecedented uprising, but it's not the first and it won't be the last. And we really stand on the shoulders of historic uprisings, like in 1969, the Stonewall uprisings. So my first question to you, Ms. Major, is what did it feel like, you know, in your body and in your soul to be able to display such power like you all did with that uprising?
It was really unique in the fact that we were fighting to stop the persecution of us and to prevent it from going any further than we allowed. And it was, I guess you could say, it was exhilarating to have that go on then, but it really didn't stop as it is going on now. It didn't stop from happening. It continued on. And as you see it now today, the same things are coming up again, whereby trans rights are being crushed and subdued. So it was a good feeling, but it didn't last.
Well, I think it did last because we are at least aspirationally attempting to continue that legacy and to continue the fire of those uprisings in these modern day uprisings. And this summer we saw rebellions happening in all 50 states in the country on Juneteenth. And one of the common denominators that you saw in some of our major cities was the presence of BYP 100. And that was young people there at the top, making sure things were Black led, that Black joy was centered. And so my next question is to Dee Dee, of like, what does it feel like to be so central to this display of power and being so critical to the current uprisings?
I think currently for me, it feels like we are making history of our own and also honoring the legacy of those that have came before us to really allow us to be in this moment of uprising. And young Black people are on the front lines. It's young Black people that's coming face to face with the police out in the streets. And in June, our organization had about 20 protests, and that was just BYP 100. But there's many cities that are still having protests every day. People are still calling for justice for Breonna Taylor and for just so many of the names that we know and we have learned to have had to learn about. We've been calling for that, and so it feels like we're really making history and standing in a long lineage of Black resistance and struggle.
We stand on so much powerful history much of which is erased, and a lot of which is Black-led, and a lot of which is Black women-led. So thank you so much for that. Whew, fired up. You fired up, Cliff?
I'm fired up. I'm ready to go.
I know you're fired up, because y'all be like in the streets, putting people on buses, rolling up to polling sites, being like, y'all better let people vote. Don't you lock these doors. We're gonna break it down. What does it feel like? What does it feel like in your soul and in your bones to be a part of such a powerful electoral justice uprising?
So for us and these other organizations on here and these activists to be able to play one part of that, right? For us to be playing a part in like figuring out our generational challenge and either fulfilling it or betraying it, we're all trying to fulfill it. And to be in this moment means a lot to us, because I know we're all students of that history. We're all students of these movements. And for us to be playing a part is just incredible. To be able to witness history, you know, even as we're living it and making it happen, you know, you can't ask for anything more.
What we're doing right now is altering the course of the future. And, you know, it's powerful. It brings a lot of joy. It also brings a lot of anxiety, right? Because we want to do it right. We want to make sure that no one is left behind. And so I just want to commend everyone on this panel for the work that you're doing. So what would you say, Sister Nkechi, if we open up these doors to the movement and we're talking out here to the masses of our folks, how can they come? What would you say to call them in to the movement for Black Lives?
Well, I just say what Harriet Tubman said: if you hear the dogs, keep moving. If you hear the noises behind you, keep moving. If the slave catchers are coming, just keep moving. Don't stop. I mean, I'm just saying, we need to keep moving. We need to keep on the struggle. But I do want to say this, because I've been listening to all of my brothers and sisters on it, and, you know, I feel like I'm almost in tears. It's like I'm feeling very vulnerable, and I'll tell you why. People are talking about joy. They're talking about the singing and the dancing and, you know, bringing the joy to the movement. But when I was coming up, it's like, you know, it was like we were working. There wasn't joy. That's why the word struggle came. We were always in the struggle. It was struggle, struggle, struggle. And it's like we never took time for self-care. Literally, a lot of us worked ourselves to death. Okay, and so I am just really overjoyed with the joy that the movement today, the uprising today, are bringing about. It was a time when, you know, we worked our 9-to-5 jobs so we could pay the bills. And then in all the other hours after that, as well as part of our 9-to-5 as well, we were in the struggle. We would have meetings up to midnight or past or, you know, or beyond. When I say we, I'm talking about the Black Power movement, the New African Independence movement, not necessarily talking about the predecessor movements at the Civil Rights movement. We were not funded. There were no full-time organizers. There were no grants. There was no joy. And I think that is what's missing then, which is making things that is happening so well now with Movement for Black Lives so successful, is the joy and is the commitment that you can't do anything unless you take self-care, unless you take care of yourself. So I just wanted to say that. And I started out with Harriet Tubman, because we do need to keep going, keep it moving, keep on pushing, and come on into the movement.
So now we need to know, now we really need to know how people can get down.
Find that organization that's on your block. It might be your neighborhood association. It might be your church group. It might just be the mamas on the corner who they're not in any organization and they don't know nothing about a 501c3, but you ask them to get 50 people to the church or to the community center on a moment's notice, and they can make it happen. Find some group of folk that you can connect to, because like Brother Kwame Ture said, you know, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, we got to be in organizations. We got to organize. And so part of what we try to do is say, look, everybody's an organizer, because everybody can touch 5 friends and family members and just share this information, share a tweet, have a conversation, right? Just let folks know why it is that you're involved. Because if you can communicate that, then guess what? You in the movement, right? If you can communicate why these issues are important to you, and why whatever strategy is that you're choosing to follow, whether it's the electoral or being in the street, if you can communicate what that means to you, then you're an organizer.
The reality is, many of us are already in movement. You're already in the movement out there. You just got to name it. You just got to say, this block association that we are running, we're going to link it up with the movement for Black lives, because we've been defending Black lives by having this Black association for all these years.
This Black National Convention could not have come at a more critical time. We're witnessing the dawning of a new movement, nothing radical, but just one for Black lives to matter. I mean, actually, it's quite ironic. We really went from Black power to just being able to breathe. We today, the young people today, the older people, all of us today, really need to go back and look at movements from the past, particularly those that didn't quite make it into the history books. And I'm talking about the Black Power movement. I'm talking about the New African Independence movement, and learn from their faults and their flaws and triumph in their victories, because that's the only way in which we can have this intergenerational type of dialogue.
I think it is critically important that everyone out there looking, questioning, thinking, am I ready? Can I get down? Yes, you are a part of the movement, because if you engage in self-care and in care of your family and your neighbors, then you are in defense of Black lives. And if you are in defense of Black lives, then all we need you to do is hook up with an organization, many of which we've named. You can link directly with the movement for Black lives. You can go to our website, infobl.org, and sign up to get all those alerts that we are all getting now to our emails and our cell phones, because there is something going down, I promise you, in every state in the nation. The time is now. And Kichi called it, there's not a more critical time than right now to make a shift and to redefine the future for our babies and for the generations to come. So I want to thank all the panelists for being here. We're gonna we'll all get together again, soon, and also next year, so that we can see and look back on this beautiful and historic Black National Convention.
Cause we're fighting for our lives. This time you ain't winning. Keep the protest going. This is only the beginning. Justice for all. I'm tired of pretending. Cause we're slaves of the system, so our pain is never ending.
I wake up, put my clothes on. Can't ignore what goes on. Systematic racism, and they're just adding loads on. Had to turn my flows on to talk about the blows drawn on Rihanna. Shower sleeping, gunshots all imposed on. A gunshot is a pin, so Brianna has been wrote on. Her family has to go on. Please don't be a moron. This revolution's televised. They know we got our phones on screaming Black Lives Matter. Cause our people getting choked on. Cause we're fighting for our lives.
If you've stayed on this journey with us this evening, you've met Black people in every corner of this country who are calling and organizing for radical change. From housing, capitalism, violence in our communities and homes, connecting to the land as a site of power, Black joy, and yes, abolition and freedom from all forms of violence. Tonight, we find ourselves in the final days of Black August. Black August asks us to fast, to study, to train, to deepen our commitment to the work. On blacknovember.org, you'll find a resource guide that includes definitions, political education resources, the vision for Black lives, and voter protection resources. Our ask of you tonight is simple. Black people, find an organization, a political home in your community to expand this 21st century liberation movement. You are not alone in your questions. You are not alone in your dreams. From protests to the polls, keep your eyes on the prize with us. From Juneteenth to Black August and beyond, never settle for less than freedom with us. Our ancestors and our children demand it. Black love and Black power to all the people. Good night.